When the noble lady proposed a relationship to me, I rejected her directly, simply because I was an orphan from the slums. This puzzled her greatly. Wouldn't marrying a noble woman be a dream opportunity for any commoner? But as I turned to leave, she ran up and grabbed my hand, because dating me was her brother's dying wish. Imperial Guard trainee number 32, Luca. In this training session, I must master dodging and deflecting bullets. Only by doing so can I shed the title of trainee. Luca would face 5 death row inmates, though outnumbered. He had completed all extreme situation simulation training, so Luca calculated that 10 seconds would be sufficient. In the next instant, he burst forward attacking them. The man hadn't even reacted, before he was already decapitated, and Luca had entered their encirclement. This was my chance to make a good impression on the commander. I had to seize it, though I had never done this before. Today I must accomplish it here. Immediately, Luca heightened his senses to maximum. Then all 4 simultaneously pulled their triggers on him. Luca rapidly swung the steel blade in his hand. Under his control, every bullet was deflected, and even ricocheted back to hit their targets. The commander was quite satisfied seeing this. Hard to believe this was something a trainee could accomplish. It seemed they had found a promising prospect. After completing all this, Luca also sustained internal injuries, but he had once again broken through his limits. As Luca exited the training room, the commander praised his performance, because ballistic control hadn't yet appeared in the trainee curriculum. For this, he expressed his intention to give Luca a great gift. When Luca looked back, the commander placed his hand directly on his eyeball. Then, to everyone's shock, Luca's eyeball was crushed directly by him. Luca expressed gratitude for this, as he had long wanted an eye capable of predicting trajectories. When he returned to the rest area, a blonde interrupted him. "I'm trainee number 12, Eli. I watched your combat just now and think you're quite talented." Seeing that Luca didn't respond, Eli thought it was his own fault. But he still invited Eli inside. "If you're here for mutual flattery, you found the wrong person." Eli Kartika. From his surname alone, one could tell he was a noble young master. Logically speaking, I had no reason to speak aggressively to someone of noble birth. I suppose this could be attributed to jealousy. Just then, Eli produced a blue pill. It can reduce wound sensitivity. But Luca refused him directly, though he noted that poor rest would affect future training. Luca thanked him for this, and he had observed Luca's training as well. "In terms of control, I still need to learn from you." He pointed to his own eye. "I have a mechanical eye for combat, so calculating trajectories isn't difficult. It seems the commander has also noticed you as a trainee, so he wanted to pay out of his own pocket to give you an eyeball." And Luca was simply desperately following the training curriculum. Unlike excellent nobles, someone from the lower classes like me cannot miss opportunities gained through individual assessments. Hearing this, Eli fell silent. Though nobles appear excellent, some guys who pass the tests still get eliminated because they pay to manipulate results. Luca hadn't expected to hear a noble tell him that not all nobles are excellent. What was this guy trying to tell me? Then he extended his hand directly toward Luca, because he felt that someone like Luca should succeed. Someone who had made it this far without relying on any external help, and Luca responded accordingly, because all of this was for the Empire. This is a story of a boy's life being shaped into a military weapon, raised in the tyrannic Akleisian Empire. The scene shifts to several days later. Luca finally obtained the predictive eye he had dreamed of, and his accuracy had improved significantly. "You successfully hit all targets in the head. I think honor students truly are different. A warrior who can fight so well and shoot so accurately, isn't that a bit excessive?" But Luca found it uninteresting, because Eli hit the same spot with every shot. However, he felt the Empire needed talents like him. Hearing this, Luca was puzzled. In the current Empire, the value of ability and talent is diminishing, because as long as one has status and wealth, even incompetent people can appear capable. But with more people like you who succeed purely through skill, won't people also develop the ability to distinguish between the incompetent and the capable? But Luca interrupted him directly, because this sounded like an insult to the Empire's system. "If I report this to the Empire, even as a noble, you would face Imperial sanctions." Eli just smiled, because he knew Luca wouldn't do that. The scene shifts to the next day. They faced their first field mission. Luca and Eli served as squad leaders, heading to the other side of the canyon to eliminate the Corrin outpost. The commander reminded them. And this combat training required no prisoners. Looking at the distant houses, Eli reminded, "They are human factions split from Earth, just like us." But Luca signaled him not to let his guard down due to meaningless sentiments, because the mech behind us isn't here to protect me. I'm certain they're here to monitor us, if we take prisoners. They might even kill us. On the planet Nova, other forces are just insects to the Empire. Everyone uses and deceives the Empire for their own interests. Hearing this, Eli fell silent, because he knew this wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. But the books taught them exactly as Luca said. The mission was quickly more than half complete, but Luca was puzzled why these people carried no weapons, though he believed the training shouldn't be problematic. Just then, Luca discovered a child trembling and hiding nearby. A child too frightened to move. He didn't know how to handle this, but the commander had said no prisoners could be brought back. Luca kept reminding himself they were just parasites consuming Imperial resources. Then he stabbed down with his blade, only to pierce through the wall. Then he reminded the child to play dead. Perhaps that could help escape this ordeal. Luca knew if the Empire discovered this, he would face severe punishment. In the next instant, a gunshot rang beside his ear. When he looked up, he found it was Eli who had fired. Luca didn't know when Eli had appeared. He knew Eli wouldn't report him, but if it were someone else, that wouldn't be certain. Then, an attack shot straight toward Eli. Luca noticed the man nearby. Had he caused the earlier explosion? Eli launched a surprise attack while the man hadn't noticed, but what greeted him was an energy blast. Luca hadn't expected him to be a power user, and the commander hadn't informed them of this. Could this be a test for us? Eli was in danger because of my hesitation. Now I must react immediately. Then I sent the others to occupy the base. Leaving him here alone was meant to buy time, but I won't let him succeed. From his gestures, he seems capable of creating energy spheres. Then I pushed my speed to maximum. If I maintain high-speed maneuvering for too long, my body will collapse first, but I need to be even faster. Just as the energy sphere was about to hit me, I successfully broke through his defense. Now is the best moment to eliminate him. Then my long blade stabbed directly into his body, but simultaneously his hand was placed on my head. In the next instant, the mech on my head shattered. Am I going to die? But the man nearby hesitated, because in his view, Luca was also just a child. In the end, Luca still achieved victory, but he didn't understand why a Corran faction member, always called a fanatic, had actually hesitated just now. Yet Luca's knowledge told him, all of this was for the Empire, to eliminate enemies threatening the Emperor and Imperial citizens. For the Imperial Guard, no other reasons need exist. After Luca completed his first mission, that man's words kept echoing in his mind. In this operation, not a single person died because he simply hadn't delivered killing blows, but his will also told him that mercy was the cause of their destruction. The scene shifts. The Centurion praised their outstanding abilities. Especially Luca and Eli, you two can aspire to become Centurions. For the glory of the Emperor and citizens, please persevere. Slum orphans like Luca would typically be assigned to the most peripheral squads. Even so, he was determined to become a Centurion in that place. Meanwhile, sparring time soon arrived. This time, it was him against Eli. At this moment, Luca clearly sensed changes in Eli's strength, because after his last injury, he had replaced it with a mechanical arm. But that was still far from enough to defeat him. Just then, Luca seized a gap in his movements, then directly disrupted his pace. By the time he reacted, Luca's fist was already at Eli's face. Looks like I win again. I thought I'd finally win this time. If acquiring a psychic sword is the only way to make you stronger, then what's the point of training? Eli noticed that the Centurion matter seemed to affect him greatly, because after hearing that speech, he seemed to have become more rigid. But Luca, unlike Eli, had only one way out, climbing upward. However, he was curious what kind of soldier Eli wanted to become. For Eli, becoming a soldier wasn't his choice, because his dream was to become a scholar, an archaeologist. But the Empire prohibited individual research into mysterious civilizations, and his family had been generals for generations. The family wouldn't let him do anything else. Luca reminded Eli not to mention this to outsiders, because if anyone reported him, he'd be finished. But you wouldn't do that, just like I keep your secrets. I only hesitated because my opponent was a non-combatant. Even if not for you, I would have gone back to kill. I'm loyal to the Empire and Emperor because they recognized my talent. The Empire's enemies are enemies, and you're no exception. Hearing this, Eli said nothing, just smiled. If your loyalty to the Empire truly transcended simple devotion, you would have dealt with me long ago. Don't push yourself too hard. Luca just frowned. You'll die if you continue like this. Time quickly came to the second mission. This was an uninhabited neutral zone. These were structures from millions of years ago, yet still showing energy reactions. Eli was fascinated by them, because this proved that millions of years ago, civilizations had already begun exploring the stars. But Luca worried Eli might say something inappropriate, so he interrupted directly. If we encounter another faction here, we'll have to fight. But Eli wasn't worried at all, because they couldn't defeat the Imperial Guard sent here. Just then, Claude, who also loved archaeology, stepped forward. With these records, we can predict the future. It makes sense that so many people are interested in history. Luca knew he also came from a great family. Though not as famous as Eli's family, he was still an existence that commoners like him looked up to. Meanwhile, he had a question for Luca. I really like you and wanted to ask if you have a girlfriend. Hearing this, Luca broke out in a cold sweat. If you come any closer, I'll consider you dangerous. Seeing this, Claude scratched his head awkwardly. Turns out he wanted to introduce his sister to Luca. But Luca believed he was just a slum orphan, unworthy of her. Eli also chimed in supportively. I heard Claude's sister is quite a beauty. Suddenly, they noticed movement nearby, so everyone took cover, while Luca and Claude went forward to investigate. Soon they discovered people on the other side. When Luca saw that person clearly, his heart shook violently. It was actually a Korite paladin. The paladin also spotted their figures. With a casual gesture, a spear flew toward them. Realizing something was wrong, Luca immediately called for Claude to retreat. Before he could react, Claude's head was pierced through. Looking at Claude dying on the ground, Luca's mind went blank. The companion who had just been chatting was dead before his eyes in the blink of an eye. His mechanical eye also malfunctioned, because the level gap with the opponent was too great to detect their movements. Then Eli also provided support from behind. Now they had to buy time. He felt Eli's decision was right, because escaping from a paladin's grasp was impossible. So they could only delay until the Imperial Guard arrived for rescue. But it would take about 10 seconds for the guard to reach here. Meanwhile, the enemy attacked them again. This time the spear came straight for Luca. Fortunately, Luca used his sword to slightly alter its trajectory. Though only 10 seconds were needed, for the few of them it felt infinitely long, because a moment's carelessness would mean death by the enemy. As the paladin lightly waved his arm, the spear reversed direction again. Damn it, am I really going to die here? But the will in his mind kept telling him he absolutely couldn't fall before the enemy's head was removed, because the Imperial army had no use for waste. Meanwhile, Luca quickly swung his sword at the spear, with a violent clashing sound. Luca's sword broke in half. After this, his arm could no longer be used, but he had also successfully survived. And only 7 seconds had passed. Now he had to prepare for the enemy's next attack. The paladin slowly drew the blade in his hand, then sent several sword waves toward him, though Luca dodged the attacks through extreme reflexes. The comrades behind him weren't so fortunate. Only then did Luca realize the enemy's target wasn't him, but these people behind him. Then the paladin burst toward Luca. Damn, is there really no escaping this time? At this moment, exactly 12 seconds had passed. The Imperial Guard assigned to them had just arrived. At this critical moment, a giant hand grabbed the enemy's head, then slammed him to the ground. But the paladin wasn't so easily dealt with. He immediately swung his sword backward, trying to create distance. However, the guard cavalrymen knocked him flying with one punch. Seeing this, Luca finally breathed a sigh of relief, because he was finally saved. And what followed was a battle between the two of them. After the paladin created distance from the Iron Guard, he drew his battle axe, Black Money, from behind. An Imperial Guard wielding Imperial weapons versus a Force-wielding Sacred Knight. Luca didn't know who would prevail. Both simultaneously swung their weapons. The moment they crossed, blinding sparks erupted, neither yielding in momentum. Soon the two created distance again. Then the Iron Guard powered up fully, bursting toward the Force Knight, fighting from ground to sky. Their speed was too fast. Luca couldn't track their weapons with his eyes. He could only pray the Iron Guard would win. As the Guard's axe continued advancing, in the next instant both weapons shattered. The Iron Guard seized this opportunity, attempting to crush his head. But the Paladin's helmet wasn't so easily broken. Meanwhile, the Paladin was trying to control the distant spear. Hearing the roaring behind him, Luca sensed trouble. The Iron Guard didn't know the spear's speed and power. He might not be able to react. If the Imperial Guard died, he would die too. As the spear burst from the ground, Luca directly accelerated with his mechanical leg, trying to weaken its speed. Then the guard also noticed the nearby commotion. Next, the Paladin grabbed his metal skeleton. Seeing this, the Iron Guard immediately concentrated all power to his right hand, then struck toward the enemy's head. In the next instant, violent sounds erupted nearby. Luca didn't know who the victor was. He could only hope it was the guard. Hearing footsteps approaching from the distance, Luca's heart tensed to the extreme. Then a mechanical arm slowly extended before him. Well done, trainee. Thanks to your help, I was able to defeat the enemy. But at this moment, Luca's face was filled with horror. The full-body mechanical armor granted by the Empire to the Imperial Guard, by removing all weak parts of the body unnecessary for combat. It was an item that could make one the ultimate weapon. Every trainee dreamed of obtaining such armor, because it was proof of being an Imperial Guard. But the Iron Guard before him had lost his head yet could still move. So, are you human or a machine? The air became unusually quiet. When the guard slowly reached toward his head, he discovered his skull was gone. Soon he lost power and collapsed before Luca. The hero I had always strived to become was actually such a monster. Luca felt his body growing cold. He didn't know if he could hold on until rescue. Is this to be the final sight of my life? Suddenly a voice interrupted him. Unexpectedly, Eli had also survived. At this moment, only the two of them remained alive. Luca didn't know if he could make it, as he felt his blood was nearly depleted. Then he asked Eli what his plans were. Ahead was the place Eli longed for. There Eli could find things unavailable in the Empire. So he hoped Eli could pursue his dreams. Reinforcements would arrive soon. Once they encountered them, both would have to return to the Empire, though Eli came from nobility, and Luca couldn't understand many of his words. But when Eli had spoken of his dreams last time, that was the most radiant light Luca had ever seen. So he wanted to use his own heart to let Eli live the life he wanted. Eli pressed a cloth strip to Luca's wound. If you keep talking nonsense like this, I'll really think you're dying. You really are a hopeless case. After Luca and Eli returned to base, they received new mechanical skeletons. Then Eli recommended the F-24 reuse model because its trial period was short, so he felt it was suitable for Luca. Last night, both were called to different departments for investigation. After all, this time 3 cadets and 1 Imperial Guard member were killed, plus the encounter with the Korite Paladin. Luca thought they wanted further investigation, but he was called for other reasons. Because this time they had found a special cube, and as a noble, Eli received some additional information. Regarding the cube's ownership, if the Sacred Alliance refused to surrender the ruins and artifacts, a massive war could break out. The Empire might go to war with Korra, while the Bellator Federation would profit just by watching us fight. So those above were weighing the value and losses that war would bring. But Luca wasn't interested in politics, because he only wanted to obey orders and fight. After all, that's what Imperial Guard members should do. At this moment, Luca was puzzled why the headless guard could still move. The commander indicated this was just a phantom phenomenon caused by residual signals. But Luca felt it wasn't. Because the guard had responded to his words even after death, Luca still had some unanswered questions. He could only seek answers that his superiors couldn't provide. The scene shifts to another location. The base had built a reception hall for the academy. It was a place for cadets to meet friends and family. Being from an orphanage, Luca thought he'd never come here. But he didn't expect someone to come looking for him. This person was Lilian Ramos, sister of Claude who had died a few days ago. Luca didn't know why she had come. Now all he could think of was that she came to question Claude's cause of death, since he had commanded that squad. But Lilian indicated he needn't be nervous. She hadn't come out of hatred, because when Claude became a guard, the family had already prepared themselves mentally. She had come today simply to see Luca, because I've always heard my brother talk about you, a very capable captain. At that time, my brother asked if I was interested in dating, but Luca believed his background was poor. However, Lilian didn't mind this, because it actually reduced unnecessary procedures between them. From this statement, Luca gathered that Lilian seemed quite interested in him. Don't you want to? I know nothing about you. Can't Lilian start getting to know you from now? Why would you choose me? A suggestion from my deceased brother, isn't that reason enough? Lilian felt this was good for Luca, because others could only dream of such an opportunity. Lilian was right. This was an offer with no reason to refuse, because this was a chance for a lower-class commoner to connect with a noble lady. Luca had come here to rise in status. If he could marry a noblewoman, he'd be closer to his goal. However, this opportunity seemed too easy, making it even more unsettling. So Luca rejected her directly, then turned and left immediately. Not long ago, he had thought Eli, born into privilege yet wanting to escape the Empire, was foolish. He hadn't expected to be stupid enough to make decisions based on feelings. This might be humiliating for the noble Lilian. Luca hoped she wouldn't cause him trouble in the future. However, Lilian ran over and grabbed his hand. This left Luca stunned. Lilian seemed very nervous. Was I too hasty? We can start as friends. Before Luca could react, Lilian ran away shyly, because she would come again in a few days. Luca looked at his hand and fell silent. It seemed difficult to shake her off. He could only take it step by step. The scene shifts to the training ground. Luca found Kinu, the combat training instructor, because he still didn't understand many aspects of fighting. But Kinu indicated there was nothing left to teach him. After all, few cadets could defeat him in combat. Luca felt this was far from enough, because it also meant some were stronger than him. Hearing this, Kinu told him not to be too hasty. Luca sought him out because he felt Kinu was different from other instructors. He was strong but not as domineering as the others. This time Luca had a new arm, 10 times more powerful than before. His only weakness now was not having a complete body, so the living parts had weaker durability. If he couldn't defeat opponents like Kinu, he'd have no chance against powerful enemies like paladins, so he had to become stronger. Then Luca swung his fist toward Kinu. Kinu could see he wanted to test his newly enhanced equipment. At this moment, Luca kept throwing punches. But Kinu caught them all, so he decided to close the distance directly. Just then, he seized an opening and grabbed Kinu's sleeve. Looks like training is over. Luca's fist shot toward Kinu. However, Kinu simply flicked his sleeve, and he was thrown away. Luca hadn't seen Kinu's movement at all, but Luca wasn't ready to give up. As he landed, he immediately launched another attack at Kinu. Kinu sidestepped to dissolve his assault. Then he grabbed Luca's foot and threw him away. At this moment, Luca was completely bewildered. What had happened? Then Kinu pointed out his weaknesses. Not understanding the opponent's strength was one reason, plus fighting with different mindsets. So what are you rushing for? Luca was shocked at this moment, because he didn't know what had just occurred. His first punch had aimed for Kinu's chin. However, Kinu had merely touched his arm, and his body began swaying, as if losing control. To be precise, the kinetic energy he had transmitted to Kinu had rebounded, shaking his body. Then Luca asked what that technique was called. Kinu's mouth opened slightly. This is a method of self-protection. Hearing this, Luca immediately stood up. May I learn from you? Kinu brushed back a strand of hair. His right eye was bleeding. Even seeing me like this, you still want to learn? Taking shortcuts always comes with a price. The scene shifts. Kinu asked what Luca had learned from the recent battle. Luca felt his body seemed bewitched, completely beyond his control. When Luca heard the technique was called Aegis, his heart jolted, because this technique was commonly used by rebels. But Luca thought it could be considered for inclusion in military standards. The instructor had indeed considered this. But Aegis technique had 3 obvious flaws. The first problem was extreme difficulty in learning. The second was side effects, like Kinu's brain issues just now. As for the third problem, Luca couldn't observe it yet. But even knowing these flaws, Luca still wanted to learn. But Kinu told him the Empire had invested heavily in him. He was already Imperial property, so it wasn't his decision. Training in Aegis combat style would inevitably affect the brain. Can you promise me you won't use it afterward? Watching Kinu's retreating figure, Luca knew that even if he lied, Kinu would know. So Luca told him honestly, I can't promise, but I'll try not to use it. Hearing this, Kinu's lips curved slightly. Then he patted Luca's shoulder. Compared to false answers, he preferred Luca's honesty. Just then, he suddenly extended a foot, throwing Luca directly into the air. From now on, you must constantly guard against my attacks. That way you can handle any situation. Luca slowly got up, rubbing his head. He knew Instructor Kinu was willing to teach him. Time quickly passed to 1 month later. Eli was concerned seeing Luca's appearance, because he looked like he hadn't slept in a long time. In this past month, Luca had sparred with Instructor Kinu daily. Kinu hadn't taught him anything specific, but let him learn independently through observation. Aegis combat methods differed greatly from what he had learned. Most combat methods focused on learning specific skills and honing them. Aegis combat method was about fully utilizing one's abilities, essentially an excellent combat algorithm that instantly mobilized all weapons in one's equipment, forming the most efficient combat style, basically developing one's brain. Then Luca asked how the mission went. Eli shrugged, indicating nothing special, all simple tasks. Hearing this, Luca still told him to be careful. Wasn't the guard captain's recent disappearance also due to that matter? However, Eli disagreed with Luca's view. I also heard some news from my family. There might be a rebellion ahead. Hearing this, Luca's heart jolted. Eli didn't know the details, only that a group was planning a rebellion. Luca beside him just silently listened. We're at war with the Creed Alliance, and now someone wants to incite civil war. How absurd. Eli interrupted him directly. But if you merely find it absurd, internal problems will continue worsening. Before Eli could finish, Luca pinned him against the wall. First, I can ignore your desire to leave the Empire, but if you want to be my enemy, I can't let you go. Grabbed by the collar, Eli showed no panic, just quietly looked at Luca. Calm down. I also passed the guard selection. Do you think I'd become an enemy of the Empire? Then Luca withdrew his hand. So don't say things that cause misunderstandings. I don't want to see your name on the traitor list. And Eli only dared say these things in front of Luca. The recovered Eli smiled. Are you free this weekend? How about I treat you to dinner? Luca turned away. I already have plans. And stop talking to me, you're too annoying. The scene shifts to the lower district of Akleisia. This place was familiar to both Luca and Kinu, as they had both emerged from the slums. Since becoming a trainee, Luca thought he'd never return to such places. I don't want to breathe the same air as these idiots. He hadn't expected Kinu's plan would bring him here. Below the capital Akleisia lay a lava zone. Geothermal energy extracted from there powered the entire city. Unfiltered pollutants and heat from the power plant filled the lower districts where civilians lived. Fortunately, Luca had escaped from here, otherwise he could only have become a failure. Soon Kinu entered a small alley. Luca could feel the gazes of vagrants and beggars. If I showed weakness, they might turn into bandits at any moment. He hadn't expected Kinu to be more familiar with the lower district's terrain than him. Though he came from the lower class, he had been a guard member for decades. Why was he still so familiar with the lower districts, even frequently coming here? He ordered Luca to use low-energy output prosthetics, arms and legs, in this battle. Though he didn't know the purpose, to receive his training, he had to do as instructed. The two quickly arrived at a gang's entrance. I have business with the manager here, he said with such confidence that the gang members hesitated for a moment. What's your relationship with Boss Aleph? Kinu scratched his head. So the current manager is called Aleph, huh? Hearing this, the gang member immediately raised his gun. You are insane, get lost now. In the Empire, few dared to point guns at Imperial Guard members and lived to tell about it, but Kinu didn't want to reveal his identity. Just then, Luca instantly dashed forward to the guard, sending him flying with a single strike. He followed up with an over-the-shoulder throw, pinning him to the ground. The guard nearby was about to draw his weapon, but Luca already had his gun aimed at him. If you want to die, you can try. You'd better call Aleph right now. This won't be a bad thing for you either. After dropping their weapons, the two went back to report the situation. Looking at the circular building before them, Luca was puzzled. What's inside? Kinu glanced at Luca and smiled slightly. A gladiatorial arena. The scene shifts. The two arrived at the management office. Aleph, the arena manager, was an overweight man. Kinu pointed to Luca behind him. Let this guy participate in the matches. I won't charge any fight fees, and it doesn't matter if he gets killed. Now Luca understood why Kinu had told him to reduce his power output. Aleph slowly took a drag from his cigarette, then flicked the cigarette butt toward Kinu. But Luca easily caught it. At the same time, gang members nearby aimed their weapons at the two. You seem to have misunderstood something. We didn't let you in to hear your requests, just to find a convenient place to dispose of bodies. While the two were talking, Luca observed the atmosphere around them. Aleph's words were just a bluff. If he wanted to kill them, he would have acted already. Luca listened carefully to the sounds around him. There were two more armed gang members outside the door. He was already prepared for the worst-case scenario. First, I'll kick over that iron table. Use it to block the gang member's sight. Then my fist will punch through the iron table, shattering the gang member's head along with it. The gang members outside will be a step late entering. By then, I'll already have a gun, climbing the walls and ceiling to position myself at the doorframe. Finally, it's bang, bang, 2 shots. Kinu asked where the previous manager had gone. Aleph was stunned for a moment. You mean Tola? He's dead. He was caught manipulating matches. But Kinu saw right through his lie. The gladiatorial arena is a profitable business. Looks like you killed Tola to take his position. But I don't blame you. Tola also killed his predecessor to get that seat. That's the survival rule of this street and this circle. Aleph suddenly stood up, and he pointed his gun at Kinu. Who exactly are you? How much do you know? However, Kinu showed no panic. Sit down, Aleph. Unless you want to join Tola, I never warned twice. Aleph broke into a cold sweat from Kinu's aura. Aleph raised his hand, signaling his subordinates to stop. He instinctively judged that Kinu shouldn't be provoked. You really want this guy to participate in gladiatorial matches? Aleph said, sizing up Luca. His pupils glowed slightly, apparently analyzing Luca's physique. Your limbs aren't suited for combat at all. Your body is just soft flesh. You'll be beaten into pulp and sent flying within 1 second. Aleph agreed to Kinu's request, but he also needed appropriate compensation. Kinu threw out the bait. I know where Tola's safe is. You should have Tola's eye as the key, right? Aleph was momentarily speechless. He was curious about Kinu's identity and how much he knew. Kinu smiled mysteriously. Just a ghost from an unnecessary past. The fat man didn't dare ask more questions. Luca learned many things from Kinu. He effortlessly controlled the situation and had the ability to handle things calmly, all things Luca lacked. The scene shifts to the lounge. Luca was puzzled about what Tola's safe was and why Aleph's attitude had changed so dramatically. Angrily looking at the tablet in front of him, it should be Tola's hidden assets, enough to change Aleph's life. Luca couldn't help but ask the question he'd been holding back. If it really comes to a fight, what do you plan to do? Kinu just smiled. Looks like you really want to know. Win, and I'll tell you. On the screen appeared a burly warrior with glowing arms, Steel Fist Gabriel. In the gladiatorial arena, there were fools everywhere who underwent illegal modifications at the cost of their lifespan. This guy was also the type who didn't care about side effects, only wanting power. In Luca's current condition, even one punch would seriously injure or kill him. Then Kinu called out to Luca again. Remember what I'm about to tell you. This is the core principle of Aegis combat technique. Accept everything that is given to you. Luca involuntarily frowned. Accept was a word he hated. It represented failure. Water doesn't fail. It just changes form. You have potential. I noticed you from the moment you deflected bullets with your bare hands. When you came to me yourself, I was actually surprised. Talented people are always drawn by something. Luca looked puzzledly at Kinu's hand on his shoulder. Why the sudden praise? Kinu showed a meaningful smile. Because this might be your final appearance. As the arena lights came on, Luca walked step by step toward the dueling platform. Seeing that Luca was still a child, the audience showed expressions of contempt. How could they send a kid to the ring? If you want to die, you don't need to come to this kind of place. But some people didn't mind. They wanted to see humans torn limb from limb, their chests and bellies crushed. Yet Luca felt no fear. He actually thought this was better, because now he finally felt like he was back home. Let me see how you've all been doing, you damned losers. In his childhood, Luca never had enough to eat. Although the Empire distributed supplies twice a month, the orphanage director would always keep more than half of the items for himself. Therefore, for the children in the orphanage, hunger was originally a normal phenomenon. But Luca didn't give up studying and training because of this. Whenever he had time, he would use it to improve himself. At first, many children mocked him. However, Luca punched them right in the face and stole their food. To build strength, you need to eat more than others. Rather than let food rot in losers' stomachs, better to let them become my flesh and blood. The strong devour the weak. Even as a child, Luca already knew this world's rules. Eventually, Luca proved he was right. At age 12, he passed the second selection exam, and at 15, he officially became a cadet. Luca never wanted to see these failures again, so during most of his time as an intern, he had almost forgotten about this place. When Gabriel entered the arena, everyone was chanting his name. Seeing Luca instantly, Gabriel looked disdainful. Looks like Aleph took too much medicine today, matching me against this little brat. At this moment, Luca was analyzing his abilities. Gabriel's limbs were all from different manufacturers. Though barely coordinated, it was just a temporary measure. Especially those massive arms and fists caused his shoulders to lean forward and his spine to curve. But he was indeed strong. This was a specially modified body with the sole purpose of becoming stronger. Gabriel looked Luca up and down carefully. Pretty face, though. How about serving me for the night? Hearing this, Luca smiled coldly. I think from now on you'll need a servant since you'll be crippled tonight. Hearing Luca's words, Gabriel burst into laughter. I'll pin you to the ground and torture you until you beg to become my servant. Aleph grabbed the microphone and shouted. A microcosm of our cruel and merciless world is about to begin. Will you be crushed, or will you stand up after crushing others? Meanwhile, Kinu crossed his arms, looking down at the arena. With an old buzzing sound, the battle began. His body was specially modified, designed for combat, while Luca used non-combat parts. This meant if he got hit, he would die on the spot. Though Gabriel was massive, he wasn't slow. Luca dodged the attack with a sidestep, then he delivered a leg sweep to Gabriel's head. However, this attack barely tickled him. Are you scratching an itch for me? With Luca's strength, if it were a normal physique, that person would have exploded like a watermelon. Soon Luca created distance between them. The arena space was small, so he didn't have many places to dodge. Gabriel attacked Luca again. All his strikes were lethal, while Luca's attacks had almost no effect. Meanwhile, the audience kept shouting for Gabriel to crush Luca's head. But Luca didn't mind these voices. He kept thinking about why Kinu brought him here, and the core principle he mentioned earlier. Being satisfied with what you have, constantly craving what you currently lack won't solve any problems. Prayer won't make guns fall from the sky. No matter how little I have, I must fight with it. Kinu forbade me from using enhanced mechanical devices, but he didn't say I couldn't use my eyes for analysis. That means he doesn't expect me to subdue Gabriel with strength, but to learn acceptance. Aegis technique is about fully utilizing one's potential. Gabriel's fist was like a destructive cannon. The slight tremor of his shoulder was the trigger, the direction he stared was the barrel, and his arm's length was the range. Compared to real guns, his preparation speed was quite slow, and his trajectory was obvious. Seeing this scene, the audience showed expressions of disbelief. In Kinu's view, Luca was completely a genius. In such a short time, he understood the Aegis fighting method and integrated his own understanding. At this moment, Gabriel was confused why his fists could never hit him. Gabriel was also angry. How could I lose to a child? Luca's concentration was more focused than before. Because of this, he could completely predict Gabriel's attacks. Did that mean he could also do what Kinu did? Then Luca grabbed his arm and kicked his knee with his front foot. Just like that, Gabriel was thrown into midair. Before Gabriel could react, Luca's foot had already landed on his face. Luca couldn't believe he actually did it. So this is how Kinu always saw me. Gabriel rubbed his head. He was very angry at this moment. I don't know what magic you used, but your powerless attacks can't defeat me. Gabriel swung directly at Luca. Though faster than before, Luca still dodged his punch. Then Luca instantly appeared in front of Gabriel. You really think my attacks won't work? If I lack pure strength, I just need to compensate with something else. Then Luca leaped up and swung his legs forcefully. His hands locked directly onto Gabriel's head. The next instant, Gabriel felt the world spinning. Then came the cracking sound of his spine. Seeing this scene, the audience showed shocked expressions. And Luca, like Kinu before, had drops of blood seeping from his eyes. If this were a chaotic battlefield full of variables, he originally couldn't have concentrated like this. It was precisely because this was a controlled environment that Luca could focus, thus able to accurately predict his movements. He had to admit now that Kinu was indeed an excellent mentor. Kinu acknowledged his abilities, because he had already stepped into the threshold of Aegis. Just then, Kinu took out a storage card. Luca was puzzled. Was this compensation for me? Kinu denied his assumption. This is the money I bet on you. Take it for Gabriel's medical expenses. If there's a chance to win his favor, there's no need to make enemies. Maintaining moderate friendliness toward others is wise. I want to become a warrior and soldier, not a saint. Kinu put his hand on Luca's head. In interpersonal relationships, you're still too young. Luca, the friendliness I speak of isn't charity, but investment, for future use when needed. Today I collected on my investment in Tola. Kinu's smile carried a hint of coldness. Luca realized he might have misunderstood something. He once thought Kinu taught him because he valued his talent, since they shared similar backgrounds. But this thinking was very wrong. Someday he too would face that moment when Kinu would collect on him, and probably in a way he couldn't refuse. The scene shifts to the other side. Gabriel's condition was pitiful. He could only use his tongue to tap the display screen, selecting artificial spine products from the catalog. Without proper treatment, he might be permanently disabled. The doctors directly recommended the latest model, as they'd long wanted to fleece Gabriel. But this product wasn't something he could afford, so the doctor gave a suggestion: sell his undamaged limbs and replace them with ordinary mechanical arms. The usually violent Gabriel now seemed helpless, because losing these would bring him close to death. At this moment, Luca was at the doorway watching this scene. Glad to see you're as energetic as before. Seeing Luca instantly, Gabriel was furious. You bastard, I'll definitely get my revenge on you. Luca walked to Gabriel's side. His sharp gaze looked directly at him. Before that fight, I already warned you. I said I'd cripple you. At the same time, Luca recalled Kinu's words about not making enemies, but he instinctively mocked him anyway. Then he turned to the doctor. How much is that Hyperion Model 9 you mentioned? The doctor looked confused. He probably never dreamed Luca would pay for Gabriel. Gabriel's eyes widened. What does this mean? Are you kidding me? Luca just looked back. Can't you tell? I'm paying for your medical expenses. Gabriel's pupils trembled, and his earlier rage vanished without a trace. Then Gabriel asked for his name. Luca, I don't know why you're doing this, but if you need help in the future, tell me anytime. I'll repay this debt. Luca stared at Gabriel for a while, then nodded. This feeling wasn't as bad as he'd thought. The scene shifts. Luca had returned to the training base. He immediately found Eli for sparring practice. Eli aimed a kick at his head. However, Luca merely deflected Eli's kick, then pushed forward with the momentum. Eli, whose force direction was twisted, lost his balance. Then Luca extended his foot to kick the outside of his shin. In an instant, Eli fell to the ground. He had completely defeated Eli with minimal force. So this is what you learned from Instructor Kinu, Aegis combat technique? Luca confirmed this. Is that street fighting technique from thugs, grabbing sand to throw when falling, or hiding glass shards in fists to stab people? Previously, Luca had also disdained this, but this time in the arena, he changed his view, using the surrounding environment and objects to flexibly respond to enemies. After all, enemies won't be gentlemen with you. At the same time, Eli called out to Luca. He had encountered a problem and needed Luca's help. The scene shifts to the lounge. Luca frowned at Eli. Eli could only shrug awkwardly. He knew it must have been Eli who let Lilian in. Sorry, Luca, Lilian begged desperately. I really couldn't refuse. Our family and the Ramos family have always had dealings. Lilian stared intently at Luca. Why do you keep avoiding me? It seemed her pride was hurt, since she'd probably never been rejected in her life. Luca answered straightforwardly. Because I'm not interested in you. I hope you'll take this as my way of refusing. Eli smiled, trying to mediate. You could say it more tactfully, but angry Luca didn't even glance at her. Luca's words surprised Lilian, her eyes widening. I'm confused about what I did wrong, or what about me displeases you. Luca denied her assumption. I don't have time to deal with women, you know I'm from an orphanage. Unlike you, one mistake and I can never get back up. Then wouldn't being friends with me be better? You seem not to understand what I'm saying, Lilian Ramos. If I rely on you for success, then one whim of yours could make everything I have collapse. But a tower built by one's own strength won't fall easily. Lilian glanced at Eli. You're friends with Eli, yet say you don't want to benefit from nobility. That's contradictory. Luca shook his head. He's a comrade and friend I can entrust my life to. On the battlefield, what protects me isn't family glory or reputation, but the comrades beside me. Lilian was momentarily speechless, her face full of unwillingness. Won't you give me even a small chance? At this moment, Luca was prepared to take a slap. Luca felt somewhat sorry, but he didn't want to leave any room. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. After speaking, Luca turned and left the reception room. Soon Eli followed out. Luca, you were too direct just now. No need to be so cold. Luca was silent for a moment. If I don't do this, she won't give up, but Eli didn't know why Luca was so resistant to Lilian. A little contact wouldn't hurt, right? However, he didn't know why he disliked Lilian either. I'm just judging by instinct. And the reason she looks at me differently is simply because the late Claude once praised me. So she must be plotting something. Eli nearby quickly gestured that Luca could take his time. But before he could finish, Luca interrupted him. You like that girl, don't you? Eli was confused about what gave it away. I can tell from your eyes, breathing, and your earlier panic. Anyway, I'm not interested. If you like her, stop wasting words and do something yourself. Hearing Luca's words, Eli gritted his teeth. Then he looked toward the lounge behind him. This status was almost impossible for him. The scene shifts to several days later. Luca found Instructor Kinu again. This time, Kinu taught him about meditation. As meditation deepened, he recalled the earlier office incident. If fighting had broken out then, how would Kinu have handled it? At that time, armed gang members were ready inside and outside the office. Without weapons, Luca didn't know how to escape unharmed. Kinu smiled. When the fight starts, I'd hide under the desk, avoiding the line of fire. Luca frowned. He couldn't understand. If the first reaction was to hide, you'd miss the chance to attack and eventually be shot full of holes. Kinu also knew Luca's approach. He would choose to fight the gang head-on. Even if shot several times, the safest approach would be to use Aleph as a hostage. However, if you really took him hostage, both would definitely be killed together. Gang boss replacements weren't unusual there. You just give them an excuse to kill their boss. In that situation, using him as a shield was the right choice. You didn't even notice that Aleph's fingers were modified into guns, or that there was a secret passage behind the left cabinet. Hearing this, Luca realized the gap between himself and Kinu. He could not only predict his actions, but had even found a secret escape route. Then Kinu slowly stood up. Aegis combat technique operates by draining all available brain resources. Do you know what this means? It means it can't serve as the standard combat technique for the Imperial Guard. Luca's whole body shook hearing this. So the brain problems you're experiencing are actually side effects from pushing brain limits too hard. Does this mean you can't use Aegis combat technique while wearing Legion armor? Kinu confirmed this. You're truly excellent. It's regrettable. I thought it would take you at least 2 or 3 months to discover this. When Luca becomes an Imperial Guard, he'll get a set of Imperial mecha, top Imperial technology, and full coverage mechanical armor. How could ordinary people wear it long term? This neural implant system relies on high bandwidth memory signal transmission. Besides providing auxiliary computing CPU, it must drain all brain resources to operate. That means when wearing the mecha, there's no mental energy left to use Aegis techniques. Kinu knew my reaction, but deliberately concealed this. Luca suppressed his anger. If he'd known it couldn't work with Legion equipment, he never would have learned it. Then Luca thanked Kinu for his help and turned to leave. Kinu smiled coldly. If you change your mind, you're always welcome. Luca gritted his teeth. That possibility will never exist. The scene shifts to half a month later. This was the first time Luca had seen the Imperial Guard captain in 3 months. This person was Headless, captain of the Akleisian Imperial Guard. He directly asked how Luca had been recently, and Luca truthfully reported the situation during this period. Then Headless changed his tone. "I heard you've been in frequent contact with Instructor Kinu." Hearing this, Luca was startled. So this was why he sought him out? The superiors knew the cadets' activities like the back of their hand. His hints about going to the lower districts and the arena incident, they definitely knew everything. Luca was about to answer when the guard captain interrupted him. "Did you learn Aegis Victima under Instructor Kinu?" Luca confirmed this. "But I've already given up Aegis combat technique." The guard captain's eyebrows raised slightly. He seemed not to expect Luca had already given up. People without qualification who want to learn Aegis combat technique get driven away by Kinu first. But those with real qualification quickly discover there is no need to learn it. So except for Kinu, no one truly masters Aegis combat technique. Hearing Hellas's words, Luca felt uneasy. "Do you want me to continue learning Aegis combat technique?" It turned out, Hellas wanted Luca to maintain close relations with Kinu. For this, continuing to learn Aegis combat technique was the best way. This was an order. Luca's eyes widened. This was surveillance. The guard captain was guarding against Kinu. Even unwillingly, countless speculations still surfaced in his mind, but he couldn't question. He had to set aside doubts and obey orders. This was what Imperial soldiers did. The only answer Luca could give was agreement. Getting this answer, Hellas was very satisfied. "I've been watching you." "Luca, you're the type who will distinguish himself." The scene shifted. Luca found Kinu. What he didn't expect was that Kinu readily agreed and didn't want to ask any reasons. Kinu stopped in front of a shop selling crude imitations of Yuri Legion models. Kinu asked Luca if he liked these toys as a child. I nodded to this, but because I had no money, I could only watch from afar. Just then Kinu called out to the shop owner. He wanted to buy all the toys here. This puzzled Luca about why he'd buy so many toys. The scene shifts. The two arrived at an orphanage in the lower district. Only then did Luca understand why he bought so many toys. At the same time, a rough voice interrupted them. Gabriel chattered endlessly. His massive frame contrasted sharply with his talkative personality. "You called me for this kind of thing? Do I look like a waiter to you?" Luca smiled. "You said I could ask for your help. They won't deliver toys here, so you've been a great help." But Gabriel said the problems were about fighting, like battles between two gangs. At this moment, Luca noticed Gabriel's physical condition had greatly improved. Even his walking had become much more balanced. Just then, he noticed Kinu nearby. He'd never heard of Kinu's name, someone even Aleph feared. Luca guessed this was probably Kinu's former orphanage. He did charity only because he'd succeeded. Soon the orphanage door opened, and children rushed out eagerly. "Thank you, ugly uncle, handsome brother!" the children shouted with laughter. Gabriel wasn't angry, just smiled. He wasn't the type of madman who'd get angry over children's words. Children took their toys and game consoles. Some fought and argued because they couldn't get what they wanted. Luca and Gabriel didn't stop the fighting, just watched from the side. In this world, you could only fight for things with strength. Not everyone could have things fairly anyway. If you need something, go snatch it. If some enjoy, others can't have. Because the world isn't abundant. They all understood this clearly. Just then, Kinu called out to Luca. He wanted to chat with Luca. Kinu occasionally came here. The director here seemed to be doing well, probably skimming quite a bit from the children's meal funds. Luca asked his confused question. "Instructor, did you grow up here?" Kinu shook his head. "I've forgotten where I was born and raised. I just occasionally visit nearby orphanages. Maybe I even went to your orphanage." Kinu looked somewhat tired. This way, he was just a retired guard member. Was it necessary for the captain to specifically monitor him? This question circled in Luca's mind. Kinu suffered from brain dysfunction. His nervous system was damaged from being unable to bear the overload. He seemed to barely hold on through superhuman willpower. Maybe Luca might end up that way in the future, but he didn't know if he could live that long. At the same time, Kinu called out to Luca again. "Did Captain Hellas send you?" Hearing this, Luca's heart lurched. Extreme nervousness spread from his head to his toes. Luca avoided Kinu's eyes, because he could see through people's inner thoughts from various details. Various speculations flashed through Luca's mind. The worst possibilities appeared one after another. He might very well eliminate him right here. If Luca doesn't want to die, stay calm. "I don't want to kill you, but it's hard for me to restrain you without killing you." Luca adjusted his breathing and gradually reduced the operation of mechanical components. "I'm an Imperial soldier, I can only answer that much." Hearing this, Kinu walked toward Luca, accepting a mission while knowing nothing, without even a direction to respond. Obeying superior orders is natural. On the contrary, all your judgments are correct. You're exactly the kind of perfect soldier the Empire expects. Then Kinu's tone became cold. "When you first came to me, did you really think you did so voluntarily? From the moment you used ballistic control without auxiliary computing devices, the superiors were already preparing. After all, an anomaly like me, while someone with Aegis combat technique talent appeared, you might think that after the KRA incident you actively sought me out to become stronger. But this meeting between you and me, you should really thank the Empire's calculations. Luca couldn't hide his inner turmoil. His body completely exposed his emotional fluctuations. This was all his own choice. His choice had no interference from others. He firmly believed this. Luca gave his answer. This was my own choice, Kinu called out to Luca again. Everyone in the world is someone's slave. Some just know they're enslaved, others don't. Free will is just an illusion, making people mistakenly think they chose their own fate. If you want to report to Hellas, you can do so anytime. Kinu's words confused Luca. Now even the Imperial Guard Captain Hellas's words seemed problematic to him. His brain was frantically telling him he should doubt the Empire and not be swayed by others' words. But if even his desire for success wasn't his own will, then what was the meaning of his existence? Luca could never find an answer. The scene shifted to the simulation training room. Luca didn't report that day's events to Hellas. If he had done so, the Empire would definitely have given him a psychological examination. Luca couldn't avoid being suspected of being infected with subversive thoughts. Obviously, his psychological examination scores would be lower than before. The Empire wouldn't forgive those with ideologically dangerous consciousness. In the worst case, they might dismiss Luca from his Imperial Guard position and send him to a forced labor camp. This matter gave Luca a headache. Did Kinu also anticipate this? So he wanted to go back to him to go through this examination. At this moment, Eli was engaged in simulation training. His body was covered with electrodes, and it was clear he was fighting intensely in virtual reality. One could tell at a glance that the training intensity was extremely high. The moment he emerged, Luca threw a drink bottle his way. This was the first time he had seen Eli training so desperately, and Eli had not expected that Luca would actually come looking for him proactively. Luca directly stated his purpose. You claim that the nobility manipulated the aptitude tests? Eli confirmed this, as it was a fact everyone knew. Luca wanted to know how he had passed the psychological evaluation. Eli narrowed his eyes, knowing that Luca was contemplating a precarious matter, though Eli did not intend to inquire further. He directly shared the method with Luca. Present a patterned version of yourself to the outside world. Keep your true consciousness as an observer placed within your heart. And this way you can pass the psychological test. Hearing Eli's words, Luca could not help but furrow his brow. What kind of nonsense is this? Eli smiled as if he had anticipated his reaction. It is like sealing away the self you want to protect and storing it deep within your heart. Even ordinary people, without mental control training, can experience amnesia or personality splits due to certain shocks. We simply do this consciously. If you consistently act like a loyal soldier, then the consciousness of being a loyal soldier will gradually manifest in your mind. If you maintain this false self for an extended period, your original self will gradually sink into the depths. Consciousness becomes like a box sunk to the ocean floor, rusted shut and unable to open. You might forget your true self. Luca was puzzled about where he had learned these things, but regardless, this was the method he needed to find himself from before he met Eli and Kinu. Though Eli did not know what Luca was planning, he still signaled for him to be careful. Interfering with psychological tests is extremely dangerous behavior. Luca had not expected to hear such words from a nobleman's mouth. It seemed Eli was genuinely concerned about him. Just then, his communicator rang. It was Kinu calling him. The scene shifts, and the two arrived at the lower district. Today's lesson for Luca was combat training. Kinu never mentioned what happened at the orphanage. He acted as if nothing had occurred, treating Luca the same as always, but Luca felt even worse. Inside are some criminal gangs. I am giving you 20 seconds. Take out everyone inside. Upon hearing this, Luca placed his hand on the electronic lock. He directly crushed the door lock. The people inside had not realized danger was approaching. The man lying on the sofa quickly noticed the commotion nearby. Kid, did you take a wrong turn? You do not look like a customer. Before entering, Luca had already faintly smelled gunpowder and the distinctive scent of energy weapons. He then observed the gang members' appearance, atmosphere, and armed status. He assessed the danger level and determined the priority order. Soon, the combat route in his mind was complete. The man aimed his gun at him. You can only blame yourself for coming to the wrong place. However, just as he was about to fire, Luca punched him and sent him flying. The few who witnessed this scene were completely stunned, because at that moment the man had already become embedded in the wall. Soon his gun also fell to the ground, just as they prepared to counterattack. Everything was too late, because Luca's earlier simulation had already locked onto them. One shot brought down all their weapons. The leader nearby immediately stood up. He fired continuously at Luca, but Luca simply sidestepped to avoid the attack. People like him actually make a living by killing, yet they themselves cannot do this job properly. Luca directly pulled the trigger. At the same time, the man in the room only then rushed out with an electric baton. If you do not want the limbs you worked hard to buy broken, just knock yourself out. The man looked at Luca's gun and his own electric baton. After hesitating for a second, he turned the electric baton on himself, after cleaning up the office. Finally, Luca looked toward the bathroom. What remained was the suspicious movement in the bathroom. When he saw clearly what was inside, it truly gave him a shock. These damned bastards. Kinu gave high praise for Luca's abilities. Well done, took about 12 seconds. Luca was puzzled. Could we not just kill all these bastards? Kinu narrowed his eyes. These vermin also have their uses. We are outsiders. Excessive intervention would disrupt the order here. Luca wanted to argue back, but he still closed his mouth. There are many people in the world who lack the ability to protect themselves. This woman is the same. Without power, this is what happens. Luca understood this point as well. The higher he climbed, the more he discovered how unfair this society was. From that day forward, Kinu continued to take Luca to the lower districts, then pushed him into combat without any information. He did all this not to teach Luca how to win. This experience made him understand an important principle, which was how to skillfully respond to the various situations he found himself in. Of course, since determining opponents' abilities is a rule of experience, Luca needed to surpass this by reading the surrounding environment and judging the best course of action. The scene shifts to another location. A girl covered in oil stains quickly came out to greet the two. She was the woman Luca had recently rescued from the gang's office. Unexpectedly, this woman was a mechanic. She had been imprisoned and tortured in a small room for months. Fortunately, her spirit had not completely collapsed. After psychological treatment ended, she quickly returned to daily life. Kinu knew Gilda came from the orphanage. She had talent in mechanical engineering from childhood, so he funded her education. However, he still hoped Luca would keep this confidential. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted the two. Gabriel had not expected to encounter them here. Gabriel wanted 2 bottles of beer, but Gilda directly refused him, because his nervous system had already been damaged. At this moment, Gabriel leaned close to Luca's ear. Recently, you have been stirring up trouble everywhere. These gang leaders are all discussing taking action against you. If they insist on doing so, then I cannot guarantee Gilda's safety either. Kinu signaled he need not worry, they will not be coming here for the time being. Hearing this, the most surprised was Gilda. She wanted to know how long for the time being meant. It could be a few months, or it could be a few years. Kinu did not give her an answer, because the more one knows, the more dangerous it becomes. Perhaps today was the last time Luca would see them. Luca gradually understood what kind of people Gabriel and Gilda were. They had put forth their own efforts to survive in this place. Gilda, despite encountering misfortune, faced reality directly and immediately began working. Gabriel, to prevent his world from looking down on him, always lived dangerously. For them, this might be the best choice. Luca could only tell himself not to pity those at the bottom. This might be his last time coming here. The scene shifted to the Imperial Guard office. Luca reported recent events to Headless. After hearing Luca's response, he spoke of Kinu's past. Instructor Kinu began his student life at an older age, originally someone who could not possibly become a guard member. But at that time, the Empire needed to accept even impure elements. It was a chaotic period. Even I am not entirely certain what kind of person Kinu is. When I was a recruit, Kinu had already become one of the important members of the Imperial Guard, especially since he mainly handled unofficial missions. Luca could not hide his surprised expression. This meant that even the guard captain could not access Kinu's information and records. The fact that Kinu favors Luca is undeniable. He has sent away several students before, but none could persist for long, which proves Luca's excellence. But he is also the person most susceptible to negative influence. Therefore, Headless felt a psychological test should be conducted on him. Luca bowed to Headless in respect. I merely follow orders. Headless rubbed his temples, then called out to Luca. Frankly speaking, guard students who accept such missions have 2 possible outcomes. Either they are silenced, or they are recognized for their achievements and become core members of the guard. I hope you are the latter. If there are satisfactory results, I will become your background. To be precise, I will adopt you. Luca Custoria, it has a nice ring to it. Upon hearing this, Luca stopped all movement, his eyes widened. He had not expected that Headless would adopt him as a son. Custoria, one of the Empire's most distinguished families. Luca was so happy he wanted to curse. He could not hide his inner excitement. This was a transaction between him and the guard captain, an opportunity he had completely fought for himself. The scene shifts to another location. At this moment, Eli was training in combat techniques. Each time his fist struck the sandbag, it produced a loud sound. He was pushing the output of his mechanical arm to its limit. Finally, he directly sent the 1-ton sandbag toward the ceiling. After finishing, Eli gasped heavily. Then he took out a bottle of ointment. He applied it to the flesh at the connection point. It looks like you have trained until your joints are worn out. Are you really the Eli I know? Luca knew he must be enduring tremendous psychological pain. If there's anything I can help with, just say so. Eli's expression appeared somewhat dejected, as if there truly was something he needed to ask of Luca, but he could not say it now. Soon I will only need you to agree to one request. Luca did not answer immediately. If Eli had reached this point, it certainly was not a small matter. If you find yourself in danger during combat, I will come to save you, even if I must risk my life to do so. Though Eli very much wanted to tell Luca everything, before things happened, he hoped all this would not develop as he anticipated. Thanks to Eli's help, Luca's performance on the psychological test was quite outstanding. He even received commendation. However, What he needed to do next was strive to become a member of the Custoria family. This was one of the few opportunities for people like them from the bottom to turn their lives around. The scene shifts to 1 month later. The Imperial Guard assembled all members. From now on, they would operate under special military orders. The purpose was to suppress rebels against the Empire. The rebels were composed of 3 families led by the Ramos family. Upon hearing this, Luca's heart shook violently. Then he turned his gaze toward Eli nearby. Lilian Ramos, also the family of Claude who died in the mission he was responsible for. So this was what Eli had been worried about before. Before departure, everyone needed to undergo equipment inspection. After completion, the train headed toward the destination. Luca had not expected the Empire would arrange for Guard members to serve as platoon leaders. The higher-ups even planned to use the uprising as training material. The deputy assigned to Luca was a battle-hardened veteran who would be Luca's capable assistant in this mission. Each of them also clearly understood they were being used as tools for student training. Even though Imperial soldiers were familiar with hierarchy and following orders, they would not easily show loyalty to a new commanding officer whose abilities had not yet been proven. Despite this, Luca still had to be able to personally control and command them. At this moment, he had already conceived 2 plans. The first was to leave matters to Sergeant Kodra to handle. Even if he gave vague orders, Kodra would manage them. This was the safest approach. The other choice was to provoke their resentment, then use his own power to suppress them. I am far superior to all of you. Therefore, you must absolutely obey my commands. Those who disobey will be severely punished. Luca intended to crush their resistance against him in its infancy, using force to shatter them. Hearing Luca's words, everyone's attention focused on him. Kodra grabbed Luca's arm, attempting to pull him to the adjacent car. Mr. Luca, please step aside for a word. However, Luca directly flung Kodra, who had grabbed his arm, away. Kodra spun in the air and crashed into the middle of the team members. You have already dared to lay hands on a superior without permission. Do you take me for a fool because of your age, Sergeant Kodra? I come from the lower districts just like you, even grew up in a 2-digit orphanage. And I am young, but why is there such a vast difference in status between someone younger like me and all of you? Anyone who is not a fool should understand, because I am far superior to all of you. I will be the finest platoon leader you have ever encountered. Kodra patted his combat suit and stood up. It was my discourtesy. I will be more careful in the future, Mr. Luca. Sergeant Kodra's comprehension was remarkably sharp. He knew Luca had not chosen the simple approach. As time passed, they soon arrived at the enemy rebel fortress, an Imperial military outpost. The guard captain would assign them battle plans here. Eli also learned about what Luca had just done. The reason Luca acted this way was to prevent them from treating him like a child. However, Eli felt that in their eyes, guard trainees were children. Soon Headless appeared before everyone. The rebels are stationed at the site of that mysterious civilization's ruins. The entire area is surrounded by 2 walls, with 5 defensive turrets inside. So their mission is to demolish those structures, then allow the army to launch attacks from all directions. All members of the armored regiment wore full-body armor. Luca knew the suppression operation was on a massive scale. The scene shifts. Luca and Eli met halfway between the respective camps as agreed. Is it because of the Ramos family? Hearing Luca's words, Eli fell into silence. Eli weakly confirmed it. Luca knew he had connections with the Ramos family, but they were powerless. If one stands with traitors, even members of the Kartika family cannot be spared. Eli did not hope for any miracles. If there is a chance, I hope to at least save Lilian. Luca gave a bitter laugh. You want to set up your first love with me? You are truly remarkable. Eli had no choice, because Lilian disliked marrying noble men, so he introduced her to Luca, who had the most potential. But saving Lilian was truly an extremely dangerous matter. This is not merely a disciplinary issue. If discovered, our superiors will execute us on the spot without hesitation. So the topic regarding Lilian ends here. Though Eli said he would not interfere. Luca already knew he was lying, because he noticed Eli's changes through ages. That fool planned to get Lilian out at any cost. Whether Eli accepted this matter was unimportant. For his own sake, it would be best not to let Eli encounter her. This might be the only way to save Eli. The scene shifts. Luca returned to the assembly camp. For them, the most important areas were the head and heart. As long as those 2 regions remained intact, Imperial soldiers would never die. Because as long as blood supply to the brain could be ensured, doctors could repair other parts. Just then, Kodra found Luca. He had carefully investigated his superior's record and knew Luca's abilities were strong. But as a veteran of 10 years, he still hoped Luca would listen to his suggestions. Upon hearing this, Luca signaled he need not worry. As long as they are reasonable suggestions, regardless of who offers them, he is willing to listen. Kodra saluted Luca. He seemed relieved as well. After the mechanized corps clears the turrets, they will breach the fortress. That is the general flow of the operation. As they drew closer, the assault vehicles stopped. Members of the mechanized regiment emerged from the halted vehicles. He led the agile integrated armor toward Arcane Fortress in a charge. The pitch-black myrmidons, a mix of second and third generation units, looked like a swarm of black soldier ants from a distance. Squad members did not even dare swallow their saliva. They stared intently at the battle situation on the display screen. Blue smoke rose from the ground. The enemy also began launching attacks against the core. Though some were hit, the losses were only 4 or 5 units. Soon some mechs reached attack range. They launched simultaneous attacks against the shield. Missiles took advantage of the interference created by the smoke. Mech soldiers directly drew spears from behind. The spear tips of the myrmidons were equipped with blades processed from a special mineral called holish. Holish neutralizes with field energy, temporarily tearing the shield. These were weapons specially equipped for this operation. With the soldiers' fierce assault, the shield was finally broken by them. In this battle, the Myrmidons' performance was crucial. If the Myrmidons failed, the battle situation would become extremely difficult. They could only wait for the Myrmidons who had destroyed the turrets to emerge. The report came after about 1 minute. Static came through the communicator. Turrets have been disabled. Please execute the next phase of operations. Sighs of relief echoed around them. Luca unconsciously curled the corner of his mouth into a slight smile. The battlefield is a terrible place. I am the kind of person who finds pleasure and achievement in this terrible tragedy. If not for this, I would have gone mad long ago. Now it is finally time to test my abilities. The plan required infantry to launch simultaneous attacks from all directions. Their superiors were determined not to let any rebel escape. The underground tunnels of the mysterious fortress were like a maze. Even in areas that had been explored, the depth reached hundreds of meters. But the rebels had modified the interior, so it might not be accurate. They must have narrowed the entrances to underground facilities to prevent Myrmidons from entering. Soon Luca's squad reached a fork in the path. Next, he decided he would take point. Luca's words left Deputy Kadra stunned. Taking point in a place like this is dangerous, Captain Luca. Are you worried that if I die, you will be held accountable? Kadra unabashedly confirmed this. But Luca had already made up his mind. I do not care about what happens after I die. Whether you and the team members will be demoted or have pay docked, I do not care. Luca felt a chill, as if the team members' gun barrels were aimed at the back of his neck. Now someone was surely fantasizing in their mind about eliminating him, their superior. The reason Luca was so urgent was because he needed to find Lilian first. Eli must also be in the tunnels at this moment. He had entered here from another entrance. If he were willing to send troops forward, he could get through quickly. Though Luca could achieve this by sacrificing his subordinates, he could not sacrifice the lives of loyal soldiers due to personal emotions, so he wanted to bear these risks alone. Just then, a trap suddenly appeared on the ceiling. Kadra quickly signaled danger to Luca. However, before he could finish speaking, Luca instantly eliminated the trap. Using Aegis combat methods, he pushed all his senses to their limits: vision, hearing, touch, smell, even taste. By sensing chemical traces in the air with his tongue, he could obtain vast amounts of information, dismantling all traps in just an instant. This scene left the squad behind him breaking out in cold sweat. Luca could clearly feel his blood vessels dilating, continuously transmitting blood to his brain. The pressure on his brain pushed him to his limit. Suddenly, everything around him made him feel irritated. He was dissatisfied with the slow movements of his squad members. Actually, they were not slow. Everything was because his brain was under excessive pressure. This was the price of power. The squad members seemed to sense Luca's irritability as well, because at this moment he was like a mad beast. Then Luca kicked the iron door of the tunnel away with one foot. The rebel struck by the iron door hit the wall and was instantly crushed. Luca's speed was so fast that they had no time to react. He coldly rushed in, as if he already knew the enemy's positions, continuously swinging the knife in his hand. Then a burst attacked the rebel nearby. The blade sliced across the rebel's neck, then lightly kicked away the falling head, kicking it toward the face of another stunned enemy. Before he could react, his head was separated from his body. A rebel soldier who looked like a veteran tried to aim his gun at Luca. But for Luca, aiming at him was impossible. He directly split the missile in half. The energy from the explosion formed 2 parallel lines. This scene left the veteran completely stunned, but he no longer had a chance. The enemy's skull shattered under Luca's foot. This scene made the previously defiant squad involuntarily swallow. Sergeant Kodra, you are moving too slowly. Please keep up with my pace. The deeper underground in the fortress, the more spacious it became. The rebels hid in the spacious area, pouring out fierce firepower. They had established a defensive line here, tactically a wise choice. Then Luca used a reflection mirror to observe the enemy's defensive line. The forces on the line numbered approximately 100. There were also retreating non-combatants in the rear, among whom there seemed to be nobles. Perhaps Lilian was also among that group. At this time, Kadra offered him a suggestion. Since we advanced quickly, perhaps we could wait a moment and regroup with other squads. Luca closed his eyes, letting his mind calm down. Because Kadra's suggestion made sense. He had not overused his brain like this in a long time. His nervous system bore a load nearly like pain tolerance training. At the same time, Luca heard gunfire from other positions. That direction did not seem to be aimed at them. There was also movement from their rear, meaning another squad had reached behind them. Besides Luca, that other team could possibly be Eli. Now the enemy's firepower has been divided between front and rear, now we charge in as well. Luca quickly signaled, 2 squad members holding shields as tall as their bodies stood at the front. The defensive line's firepower poured onto the shields, but the layered shells gradually cracked from accumulated damage. Cannot hold for more than a few seconds. Luca observed the enemy from behind the shield bearers. He classified enemies according to their danger level and confirmed the firing lines of high firepower weapons. Weapons that could blast him away with one shot numbered about 8. So Luca chose to charge out the instant half of the high firepower weapons were reloading. He quickly leaped over the shield bearers' heads. Advancing straight for about 2 seconds would pose no problem. The panicked enemies poured firepower at him. Luca ignored handgun and rifle bullets. His helmet and chest armor provided sufficient protection. He only needed to protect his face. He used his left hand to protect his neck and head, then raised his handgun to aim with his right hand. Luca first shot the soldiers aiming high firepower weapons. As gunshots rang out, their weapons exploded in succession. Then Luca landed in the center of their group. They could not fire immediately. Taking advantage of this gap, Luca drew his saber from his waist. At such close range, the gunmen had no time to react. Under the combined internal and external assault, they finally chose to lay down their weapons and surrender. Subsequently, Luca left the handling of prisoners to Kodra. However, at this moment, Luca froze in place. Some of the soldier corpses on the ground were extremely familiar to him. They were members of Eli's squad. Eli is advancing forward, sacrificing his men, so he has no time to regroup. Has he already reached such desperation that he is willing to abandon the lives of his subordinate soldiers? Damn Eli Kartika, damn Lilian Ramos. Luca wanted to help Eli, but he was an Imperial soldier. Making a choice meant abandoning the other side. In this situation, he did not know how to choose. But if he encountered Lilian, he would definitely kill her on the spot. Even if it meant being despised by Eli, only by preventing him from becoming a traitor could his life be preserved. At the same time, Luca signaled Kodra to wait here for other squads to arrive. From now on, you are in command. Then he moved in the direction of the battle. Those nobles were not skilled with weapons. Weapons too heavy for them only bought a little time. Most of the suppression forces had already entered and were eliminating the rebels. Luca had to admit one thing. Though it sounded cliché, Eli was not only someone he trusted in battle, he was also his friend. Eli was the first person among Luca's peers who could exchange profound insights with him as an equal. But now he had sacrificed Imperial soldiers for personal purposes. An ordinary squad would never risk their lives to pursue rebels. Even if he truly contacted Lilian, how would he get her out? Lilian would ultimately be executed. Though Luca knew Eli liked Lilian, was it really worth paying with his life? Just then, a voice interrupted him. I am a noble of the Ramos family. The man spoke with difficulty. He barely maintained consciousness. Luca directly asked him, where did Lilian go? The man was stunned. I do not know where she went either. His pupils instantly shifted to the side, one of the habits of lying. Luca directly crushed his mechanical eyeball. This is a rather expensive cyber eye. The noble let out a painful scream. Last chance, where did Lilian Ramos go? The man immediately told him Lilian's direction. Then Luca asked him again, have you seen Eli Kartika? The noble confirmed it was he who killed all these people, even though they had already surrendered before he finished speaking. Luca directly crushed his head. They are all targets to be purged anyway. Killing them now might actually be merciful. Luca normally felt no guilt when killing, but today he felt particularly numb. Is this what battlefield are truly like? Before long, Luca heard gunshots and screams. That was right, he had caught up with Eli. Though he got along well with Eli, Luca had always felt uneasy. If Eli betrayed the Empire, what would he do? Now it was time to give the answer he had always delayed. In the center of the dining hall, Eli stood there, as if about to give a speech. So you still came. Luca, you actually did it. You personally killed these subordinates for selfish gain, all for a woman, all for her. Luca's right eye rotated independently. The Ramos family appeared. In a corner of the banquet hall, the Ramos family patriarch and his direct relatives, Lilian, was also here. Luca gritted his teeth. Damn it, all for that damned woman. Are you really going to oppose the Empire? Eli's voice was heavy. I know you cannot ignore this matter. Then he drew the long sword from his leg. Come and fight, Luca. Luca suppressed the anger rising in his heart. I shall judge you on behalf of His Majesty the Emperor and the Imperial citizens. The suppressed emotions made his teeth feel cold. Luca now had to fight Eli. Thinking calmly, he held the advantage, so as long as he made no mistakes, victory would be his. But actual combat never goes according to plan, and Luca's target was not Eli. He focused on the several people trying to escape nearby. Eli wanted to protect the Ramos family, specifically Lilian. The Ramos must be killed, Lilian must be killed. Even if there would be resentment in the future, at least now he could save Eli. Even if he became Eli's mortal enemy here, and their relationship shattered, it did not matter. At least he would not have to kill him personally. Kill the Ramos family and witnesses, cover up Eli's atrocities. Even if there were suspicious signs, as a member of the Kartika family, there would always be ways to muddle through. But Eli seemed to have seen through Luca's thoughts. You plan to ignore me and attack Lilian directly? Luca did not answer, but directly charged forward. Eli also pulled the trigger, trying to stop him. Gunshots rang out continuously. For them, ballistic prediction was a basic skill. Single shots were useless. This was only to slow his speed. But Luca had forcibly expanded his neural signal transmission speed and bandwidth before taking the battlefield. He upgraded him, could act faster and more precisely than Eli could predict. In other words, Eli could not stop his actions now. Soon Luca broke through Eli's defensive line. Two sons of the Ramos family raised their guns at Luca. Eli shouted for them to put down their weapons and not resist, yet they still tried to pull the triggers. But this was too slow for Luca, disgustingly slow. Luca split the younger son's body in half with one slash. Through ages, Luca could predict Eli's attacks. He directly turned and used his blade to block the bullet. As he rotated the blade, the bullet's trajectory went straight toward the other son nearby. Now only 3 people remained: Patriarch Hugo, Mrs. Ramos, and Lilian. Hugo witnessed the death of his 2 sons. He tried to shout something, but Luca pierced his skull directly with his blood-stained blade. Luca did not withdraw the blade. Instead, he continued slashing toward the lady nearby. The death of 4 people was completed in an instant. Only Lilian remained. Eli frantically shouted from behind for Luca to stop. Lilian Ramos, the woman who had once expressed love to him, he would never forget her in this lifetime. At least before he completely lost his conscience, what he could do now was let her die without pain. This was the best thing Luca could give her. Farewell, Lilian Ramos. However, when Luca saw her expression, he discovered she was actually smiling. Joy appeared on Lilian's face. Ah, are you smiling? Luca's mind went completely blank for a moment. This gave Eli enough time to catch up with him. Soon Luca was knocked aside by Eli's direct impact. The 2 blades scraped together, creating sparks. Eli, did you see that woman's expression? Her family died, yet she was smiling. Eli seemed to understand why she was laughing. She had finally been freed from her family, because the clan had treated her as a tool for arranged marriage. Then Luca kicked Eli away with 1 foot. Is Lilian Ramos worth you doing this for? You're smart, don't do anything foolish, it's not too late now. Eli didn't seem inclined to accept his persuasion. Luca, you know nothing. Including the Ramos family, all the families accused of being traitors never truly raised the banner of rebellion. The Empire just found an excuse, actually intending to purge them. Look how fragile the defenses of those who attempted treason were. If they really wanted to rebel against the Empire, they should have allied with the Holy Kingdom of Korra or the Federation of Bellado. Luca couldn't refute this for a moment, because it was exactly as Eli said. With 3 families united, the rebel force was still too small, and there was no external support. If they were truly plotting rebellion, there was no reason they wouldn't get help from Korra or Bellado. Both countries hoped for internal division within the Empire. If what they said was all true, then Eli would eventually die just like Lilian. Meanwhile, Lilian was no longer silent. The reason the Empire targeted our family was precisely this. Lilian searched through nearby corpses. Then she retrieved a cube from the bodies. It was because of this that they were able to activate this ancient fortress. Luca was puzzled why she would bring this up at such a time, and Lilian could see that the reason Luca wanted to kill her so badly was because she was worried that Eli would be implicated as a result. You must know that your friend cannot live the life he wants in the Empire. But there's a choice that benefits all 3 of us. With this, we can activate the spatial teleportation device in the underground fortress. Luca, help us escape the Empire's control. Luca looked at the cube box before her in disbelief. If you want to kill me, go ahead. I won't kill back either. Eli's strength is no match for yours. As long as I die, everything will be over. I don't want to ruin Eli's life. But if this relic can activate the spatial teleportation device, Eli and I can escape the Empire. You can pretend you never saw us. Only the Ramos family knows about this passage, so as long as they get inside, they won't be discovered. After hearing Lilian's words, Luca began to hesitate. She didn't care whether Lilian lived or died. However, for Eli, this was the best solution. Previously, he had had a chance to escape the Empire, but he chose to give it up for Luca's sake. This was a battlefield. Disguising a disappearance or death would be easy. Suppose she dealt with Lilian and managed to keep Eli alive, but Eli wouldn't live long either. Someday he would find himself in a situation where even his family background couldn't save him. Luca spun her sword once and sheathed it at his waist. Just as Eli was about to speak, Luca interrupted him. Shut up, Eli. I only ask that you promise me one thing. If the spatial teleportation device Lilian mentioned doesn't exist or can't be activated, don't stop me anymore. You heard it too. Lilian doesn't want to see you in trouble. Eli bit his lower lip and looked at Lilian beside him. Lilian nodded readily. Finally, Eli also agreed to Luca's terms, because this was already the biggest concession he could make. Luca felt he must have gone crazy too. Now he was helping Eli and Lilian Ramos escape. If his superiors found out about this, he would be dead. They had just formulated a simple plan: activate the teleportation device on the underground level, get Lilian out, and take Eli along as well. Just then, Lilian called out to Luca. because blood was still flowing from Eli's forehead. Lilian took out a handkerchief and wiped Eli's face. "If we're lucky enough to get out alive, you two might as well live together." Eli wiped away the blood and smiled weakly. Lilian was stunned for a moment. She felt guilty toward Eli because she hadn't expected Eli would go this far for her. Eli signaled her not to feel guilty. It was she who had shown him the outside world. If not for her, Eli felt he would have gone mad long ago. He was just different, not strange. After listening to their conversation, Luca frowned. Lilian was the woman who had influenced Eli's restless thoughts. Restless thoughts were like a contagious disease. Once out of control, they would spread through people and slowly erode the empire from within. If these dangerous ideas were allowed to spread, the empire would perish. Before that happened, it might be attacked and destroyed by the Federation of Balato or the Holy Kingdom of Korra. But Luca didn't want the empire to collapse. If Eli weren't his friend, Luca would have killed him long ago. "I'm not a restless person." Luca repeatedly chewed on these words, engraving them deeply in his heart. As they went deeper, fortunately they encountered neither rebels nor Imperial forces. No Imperial forces reached here before us. The rebels also didn't seem to think they would penetrate this deep underground. Lilian's father, Hugo Ramos, was an ambitious man who thought he could deceive and use the royal family, but he was the one being used. Then Luca asked how much farther to their destination. Lilian pointed ahead. They just needed to walk to the end of the corridor. Lilian thanked Luca, but Luca wasn't doing it for her. Rather, it was to repay a debt to Eli. Then Lilian and Eli agreed on a meeting place. If they could get out, they would go to a border city. If they got separated, they would meet there. Lilian also suggested Luca come along, but Luca directly refused, because he had no interest. Luca's mind and body had been pushed to their limits, and his usually sharp judgment had become clouded. Perhaps his determination to help Eli was also a misjudgment made in his mental haze. But he couldn't let his guard down now. He still had to think about how to report this incident afterward. Fortunately, the Imperial Guard captain had a good impression of Luca, so only he was qualified for the task of monitoring Kinu. Even if suspected, he didn't think he would be disciplined. After all, Eli and Lilian were just a trainee and a noble lady, not big shots. They probably wouldn't investigate deeply. They weren't central to the rebellion. Soon they reached the end of the passage. Luca signaled Eli to prepare. If there was no spatial teleportation device here, then everything would be over. Eli didn't answer, just nodded. The moment Luca pressed the door-opening mechanism, he felt something unusual. His senses absorbed the surrounding abnormalities like a sponge. He had to find the source of this unease. Otherwise, he would die. Now Luca was certain the culprit was behind the door. As the door opened a crack, Luca decisively closed his eyes and quickly distinguished the smells. The first thing he smelled was fresh blood, followed by the strong odor of machine oil and metal, with no distinctive body odor of living beings. Luca bit his lower lip hard. Then he opened her eyes. No matter how he thought about it, there was only one conclusion. It was the Imperial Guard, and there were 4 of them. This scene left Luca completely at a loss. If it were one Imperial Guard member without power armor, perhaps he and Eli could fight with all their might, but there were 4 Guard members before them. Escaping from their hands was impossible. The Guard not killing Lilian but capturing her alive was also the worst outcome. Lilian couldn't endure torture and interrogation and would confess everything. Even if her will was strong, she was just an ordinary person who hadn't received training like Luca and the others to ignore pain. Luca had thought he could get them out and help Eli live the life he wanted, but that was just a beautiful fantasy. The moment Lilian was captured alive, his and Eli's act of betrayal would also be known by their superiors. Luca had only one option left, to kill Lilian with his own hands right now. But Lilian was the person Eli desperately wanted to save. If he lost control and charged at the Guard, everything would be over. Meanwhile, all the Imperial Guard members noticed Luca's figure. The more Luca hesitated, the more suspicious they would become. Now the last chance was right in front of him, just as Luca was about to turn back to deal with Lilian. Gunshots had already sounded behind him. Eli had already aimed the gun barrel at Lilian's brow. He pulled the trigger. This was an emergency execution. Lilian shed tears because her beautiful fantasy had been shattered. With a thud, Lilian fell to the ground. One of the Imperial Guard members walked toward the 2 of them. "Luca, why did you 2 kill that person?" Eli firmly told them it was just the execution of a useless prisoner. Then they asked Luca to report all the detailed circumstances, so they could make their judgment. After that, they left the place. What Luca hadn't expected was that Eli would personally kill Lilian. He had even considered the worst-case scenario of Eli losing control. The scene shifts to the next day. The rebellion of the 3 great families had been completely suppressed. Soon Hela summoned Luca. "Well done, 21 Squad Leader Luca. Kadra spoke highly of you. He especially praised your combat ability. You're the most outstanding platoon leader he's ever seen. However, he pointed out that your ability to build trust with subordinates is lacking, but you can solve this by learning from Kinu. According to the report, you went to the bottom level under Lilian's guidance. You obtained the spatial teleportation device and then executed him. Why did you specifically choose Lilian as a guide?" Luca stood motionless, maintaining his composure. Because Lilian had the lowest combat ability among the Ramos family. There are too many variables on the battlefield, so I chose the prisoner who was easiest to control. Headless nodded because this explanation made sense, but he still had one doubt. Luca planned to take the initiative before he could probe further. Although it was somewhat unreasonable, it was the better choice. Are you referring to the relationship between Lilian and me? Not just you. Both you and Eli had dealings with Lilian Ramos. Luca clenched her fists. Eli and I are excellent. Although we had private dealings with Lilian, we're definitely not fools who would ruin a mission because of that. You know this better than anyone, Captain. And to be honest, I wanted to give Lilian some hope. I'm not without feelings. After completing her guidance, Lilian believed she could survive. We thought this was the least we could do for her. Lies mixed with truth are more convincing. What Luca was saying now was exactly that. After hearing Luca's words, the guard captain smiled. That's enough. Let this matter end here. Just as Luca was about to leave, Headless called out to him again. Speaking of which, the Ramos family's methods were unexpectedly impressive. Eli's squad was completely defeated. Luca remained calm because the report had made it very clear that Eli's squad had fallen into an ambush by the Ramos family during an emergency pursuit and was wiped out. He had no reason to feel panicked. But Luca didn't understand what Headless's probing meant. He felt he could break out in cold sweat at any moment. If I had been in his position at that time, I would have definitely found a way to prevent my troops from being annihilated. It looks like this time's top position should be mine. After hearing Luca's words, the guard captain laughed heartily. I look forward to your performance. In the days after Luca returned, he had been tense the whole time, never relaxing. Various scenes and people flashed through his mind. Border City, the place Lilian had wanted to go. She hadn't been able to escape the Empire and died under the gun of Eli, whom she thought was a knight. Luca couldn't bear to look at her face at that time. The reason Eli killed Lilian was because Luca was present, otherwise he would have willingly died with her. Although the story unfolded in a twisted way, Luca still saved Eli. After returning to the capital Akabalan, they underwent maintenance and rest. They were then awarded honor medals for their achievements, the 7th class cross-sword medal. Among all the Imperial Guard cadets, only Luca and Eli received such honor medals. 2 days later, Luca called Eli to the back of the dormitory building. I didn't expect you would kill Lilian. I thought you would charge hopelessly at the guard. Eli responded to Luca flatly, if you hadn't been there, I definitely would have done that. This was the answer Luca had expected. Eli couldn't have killed Lilian out of self-preservation. You should quit. You're not suited to be a soldier. Luca frowned. He still remembered that day's events. Eli had gotten his squad members killed because of personal emotions. As long as you don't kill me here, no matter what, my family will make me an Imperial Guard member. Then Luca punched his in the stomach. The medal also fell. Eli covered his chest with one hand, bent over against the wall, gasping. The punch clearly made the sound of ribs breaking. If it's broken, replace it with mechanical organs. Stop pretending to be pitiful. Eli slid down the wall to sit on the ground, burying his face in his knees. How ridiculous. I actually got a medal. He began to regret not training harder. Luca remained silent because even if she had trained, the result wouldn't have changed. Eli wasn't a cold-blooded killer. He felt deeply guilty about killing his subordinates. Despite everything he did, he still couldn't save Lilian. Without doubt, he would die soon. Maybe it was his thoughts, or maybe it was their fate. He indeed didn't belong to this empire. When returning, Eli planned to request leave to go back to her hometown. He didn't ask Eli why he was going home, only vaguely guessing that he might have made some kind of inner decision. Luca hesitated for a moment, then finally voiced the question that had been on his mind. Why was Lilian able to smile after her family all died? Eli looked at the sunset. Lilian Ramos had been betrothed since birth. To a man more than 30 years older than her, he had offered the Ramos family a large dowry. But the conditions were quite harsh. He sent photos, videos, and records of his late wife, demanding that Lilian be trained to become exactly like his former wife, from appearance to speech patterns, even down to small behavioral habits. Even her name was chosen for this reason. That's why she was so proficient in balado as well. Luca couldn't understand for a moment and frowned. This demand was disgusting. He felt the horror of twisted desire combined with power. So she had been abused since birth. Eli confirmed this. Only Claude showed her sympathy. But Luca was puzzled. Why did you and Claude suggest that Lilian and I get together? Eli covered his face and laughed. So this was Eli's plan. I told Claude that Luca was the guard captain's illegitimate child, so Claude made that suggestion to you. Luca was also stunned. That guy believed such a ridiculous lie? Anyone could see that the captain gave you special treatment. If you were the guard captain's illegitimate child, rising from a 2-digit orphanage number to guard cadet would be more believable. The Imperial Guard captain is from the Custoria family. As long as she married you, Lilian might have gained her freedom. Now Luca felt terrible. Eli was his friend, but he wasn't a good person. When necessary, he would use and deceive others. He had personally killed his own subordinates and had lied to him too, but ridiculously, he still trusted Eli. The scene shifts to Luca visiting Instructor Kinu again. Our war hero has finally arrived. I heard you received the Cross-Sword Merit Medal. Luca regularly visited Kinu because he was someone she needed to keep close watch on. Kinu knew very well that he was following orders from that high-ranking corps commander. That's just a 7th-class merit medal that anyone could get. Compared to your glorious military record, Instructor, it's still far behind. Luca casually sat in a nearby chair. His relationship with Kinu was no longer so formal. Rather than superior and subordinate, it was more like teacher and student. Kinu looked at some of Luca's combat records. You used Aegis combat techniques well, but your fighting relies too much on individual ability. As a commander, you have flaws. Your subordinates don't listen to you much, do they? But in Luca's view, they were all excellent Imperial soldiers who would execute even a stranger squad leader's orders without hesitation. After hearing Luca's words, Kinu stroked his chin thoughtfully for a while. As a commander, you're too soft-hearted. You'd rather take on more risk yourself than sacrifice squad members. Because in Luca's view, only this way wouldn't lose combat effectiveness. However, Kinu directly negated his view. The more you fight on the front lines, the heavier the burden on your brain becomes, which affects your most basic skill as a commander, decision-making. You waste resources that should be conserved just to protect your people. Luca couldn't understand. So you mean I should sacrifice squad members? Kinu didn't mean ordering them to die, but letting them willingly choose to do so. Then Kinu tapped the table beside him. Images of Gilda and Gabriel appeared. Those two would be very happy to help you. Luca knew this because he had helped both of them before. But Kinu told him this wasn't enough. If you encounter real danger, they'll betray you. You need to build deeper relationships through emotional communication, like family and friends. Of course, you must also maintain appropriate distance. If the relationship becomes too close, you'll be reluctant to sacrifice them. Kinu's words sent a chill through the air. Luca directly expressed his feelings. He didn't like this approach. Kinu didn't think there was anything wrong with Luca. On the contrary, this was exactly what he valued about him. The key is to accept love but not give love. This is the secret to maintaining dominance in all interpersonal relationships. Luca was puzzled. What if my mind can't handle other sacrifices? Like guilt or remorse? Kinu said casually. You must get used to it. If not, you'll never be able to surpass others and stand above them. Luca slowly nodded. This wasn't a question of whether to accept it, but reality and fact. Then Luca bid farewell to Kinu. Luca was hurrying to the guard captain's summons location, because he wanted Luca to go somewhere. Akleisian Academy. Although Luca directly refused, Headless overruled his refusal. You've never experienced noble society. This time you can experience it indirectly, if you really want to become a member of the Custoria family. In the end, Luca could only accept Headless's proposal. As the appointed time arrived, the roar of engines came from the sky above the airport. A black aircraft landed on the tarmac. Don't just stand there stupidly, come in. It was a girl's voice, tinged with impatience, though she couldn't be seen from outside. Luca shrugged and walked in. Inside, he saw the girl who had just spoken. I'm the cadet of Imperial Guard, Luca. Before she could finish, the girl interrupted him. I know your name, no need to state the obvious. Her attitude was very aggressive, probably because she'd never been hit for being rude, so she must be nobility. Just glancing a few times, he found the girl was about his age. I'm here on the captain's orders. Is the destination Akleisian Academy? The girl sneered and turned away, as if looking one more second would make her explode. He really wanted to punch her in the face. These damn nobles. I understand, Miss Custoria. The girl looked directly at Luca for the first time, then frowned. How did you know? This was simple deduction. Very few people could express dissatisfaction with Captain Headless's orders. She was puzzled whether Luca had known her identity all along. Perhaps this woman was the guard captain's daughter. If Luca's guess was wrong, it would just be momentary embarrassment. Fortunately, this gamble succeeded. She seemed interested in Luca's ability, and her attitude softened slightly. I'm Giselle Custoria, sent by my father to serve as your guide. But don't act like you've seen through me, it annoys me. Luca recalled the previous Lilian. Compared to her, this one's attitude couldn't be better. Luca didn't understand why he had to bow down. He did all this not to curry favor with some high and mighty figure. He accepted this academy mission precisely because he wanted to escape that kind of life. Luca was certain Headless knew his thoughts. Rather than pleasing someone who hates me, I'd rather bite my tongue and die. Let's each complete our own tasks. You guide me, I follow. Is that acceptable now? Giselle seemed surprised by Luca's statement, staring at Luca for quite a while. Soon she bit her lower lip unwillingly and turned away without answering. What a young lady who made you want to break her nose. Not metaphorically, but literally. Luca also crossed his arms and looked out the window. Before they knew it, they had arrived at Akleisian Academy. No matter how strong-willed the young lady was, she wouldn't dare directly defy her remarkable father. So she could only grumble, while silently fulfilling her duty as a guide. After passing through the steps, a towering statue of the first emperor came into view. Below the statue were carved words of praise, Guardian of Humanity, Dino Akleisian. Akleisian Academy, which Luca often saw in the media. This was his first time clearly feeling the Academy's atmosphere. As soon as Luca arrived at Krasia Academy, he felt the surrounding gazes. Students walking by were all looking at him. Their eyes were filled with contempt. The passing students all used high-grade mechanical bodies. Luca felt it was truly wasteful to use them on these good-for-nothings, because they were all pampered waste. Just then, Giselle called out to Luca, "Don't you have clothes in this light purple color?" She was somewhat panicked now because her father hadn't told her that Luca was unprepared. Her reaction amused Luca. Just then, a student noticed him. Soon, Luca heard someone calling his name. Like Luca, he was a dispatched guard cadet, Felix Egan. The Egan family was also a distinguished noble house. He seemed to recognize Felix's identity too, and didn't intend to disturb their conversation. He agreed to give them a moment to catch up. Felix put his arm around Luca's shoulder. "The guard captain treats you with special favor. Now he's even more blatantly partial to you, even sending his own daughter to your side." Luca smiled. "She's an annoying person. If we were outside, I would have broken her nose long ago." Felix laughed heartily at Luca's complaint. Even the guard captain would dote on his own daughter. "Maybe he wants you as a son-in-law." If it were as a son-in-law, Luca couldn't stand a woman like Giselle. It wouldn't be surprising if their relationship fell apart. He had a secret agreement with the guard captain. As the price for monitoring Kinu, Luca would be brought into the Castoria family. However, not as a son-in-law, but as an adopted child. But Felix's guest couldn't be completely dismissed either. Felix treated friends with a straightforward attitude. He quietly asked Luca if that part had been modified. Luca noticed Felix's gaze and naturally knew what he meant. No, not yet. Felix seemed to have expected this and began searching through his pockets. Dispatched military cadets are traditionally popular with female students. Luca looked down and was stunned to see it was condom. Felix briefly introduced Luca to information about the academy, and Luca liked his personality too. Surely they could become friends in the future. Felix had just mentioned the dormitory situation. Talented students from lower backgrounds like him, as well as children from unpopular noble families, all lived there. They simply couldn't afford to buy their own housing. So even within the academy, a class system existed. Under Giselle's guidance, Luca soon arrived at the dormitory. At the dormitory entrance, a robot led the way. Was this really where commoners and useless nobles lived? No wonder it was called the finest academy. Although not suitable for soldiers, this was indeed a place where people with exceptional talents gathered. Luca sat on the sofa and entered meditation. This was completely different from his impression. After Giselle led Luca to the dormitory, they exchanged contact information. Although she was indeed a bit angry, she still had to fulfill what her father had assigned her. Luca thought she shouldn't just be a spoiled child. Before leaving, Giselle gave Luca a small piece of advice. Don't get close to the dormitory head, because she was the craziest person in the entire academy. Just then, the room's doorbell suddenly rang. A girl shorter than Luca by a head said nervously, "Hello, I'm the dormitory head." She looked very surprised. Luca awkwardly scratched the back of her neck. "I'm Luca, a dispatched guard cadet." Luca observed her appearance, worn cuffs and shabby clothes. She also had no surname, indicating she wasn't nobility. Luca couldn't see any signs of mental instability in her at all, so he guessed that perhaps Giselle just disliked people from lower social classes. She seemed rather shy too. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Luca." "I'm Barbara." Luca indicated she didn't need to be so formal. He was also from the lower classes, plus being dormitory head was quite an achievement. Hearing Luca's words, Barbara smiled awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Luca guessed Barbara must have made tremendous efforts like himself to get here. "Come with me, Luca. Let me show you around the dormitory now. You can't refuse, it's the dormitory head's responsibility." Looking at Barbara walking ahead, her bright red gold hair still had many water droplets. She must have just finished class and taken a shower. Luca thought she must be very time-conscious, though he sensed something slightly off through Aegis. But if Barbara was a diligent person, that would make sense. Luca changed into the academy uniform. Giselle was waiting for him at the teaching building early in the morning because Headless had arranged for Giselle to attend classes with Luca. If Giselle maintained the same attitude as before, Luca felt he would go crazy, just as they were about to leave. A voice made Giselle's whole body tremble. "It's been a while since I talked to you, Giselle." Hearing this, Giselle narrowed her eyes. "Disappear from my sight immediately, Barbara." Barbara looked fearful and cowering. "I just wanted to say hello to Giselle. You're always avoiding me." Then Giselle turned around directly, quickly walked up to Barbara. "Hello, Barbara, and goodbye now. Is that good enough? Then get lost quickly because I have nothing to say." Then she turned and left. After all, Luca couldn't be late for his first class. Giselle and Barbara seemed to have some history, and Giselle treated Barbara the same way she treated him. But Luca was puzzled. With Barbara's abilities, could she really become dormitory head? He couldn't understand. Luca became curious about their relationship. Then he directly asked Giselle what she knew about Barbara. Giselle's brief answer seemed reluctant to say more. "Just know what she looks like. We entered the same year. You don't like Barbara." Luca's words seemed to touch her nerves as Giselle suddenly stopped. Barbara is the craziest mental patient in all of Krasia Academy. Yet Barbara was obsessed with Giselle. Although the situation seemed interesting, Luca didn't want to meddle. What he needed to do now was persist for 2 months, then he could become nobility. After that, he wouldn't need to worry about such gossip. Since these courses were boring, Luca really wanted to uncover the relationship between Giselle and Barbara. In this place, nothing could provide him with entertainment. After all, everything was prepared for nobles. Felix also didn't want to spar with Luca because he knew he couldn't win. Right now, Luca just wanted a good fight. He'd get rusty if this continued. Perhaps influenced by training camp life, Luca's mind was full of war and weapons. Anyone would do. Even a big argument would be fine. Just then, a voice interrupted him. "You've been pestering Miss Giselle all week. What's your relationship with her?" Luca hadn't expected someone to voluntarily come to him. "Do you like Giselle?" From the center-parted guy's reaction, there was no doubt. He hadn't expected that annoying person to have admirers. Hearing this, he swung his fist directly at Luca. However, Luca merely waved his hand and subdued the center-parted guy. Luca couldn't believe he was venting his frustration on such a person. He felt he could kill him with less than one punch. Then Luca told him he had no interest in Giselle. Soon the two sat nearby chatting, because Luca wanted to get information about Barbara and Giselle from him. Enrico's answer was somewhat strange. Her nickname was the Witch. No one in the academy liked her. Anyone who got close to her would get caught up in robot malfunction incidents. Over the past 3 years, there had been 5 injury incidents, so students called it Barbara's curse. Luca was also somewhat surprised. Probabilistically, this was too outrageous. He thought manipulation was more likely. Enrico confirmed this. At first, everyone thought so, but there were no traces or evidence of manipulation. The only connection was that all victims had close relationships with Barbara. Then Luca learned from Enrico that Barbara became dormitory head not because of outstanding ability, but because the position had no benefits, only a pile of troublesome matters. Meanwhile, Enrico pointed to the side. 3 girls were blocking Barbara's path. One of the girls poured the water in her hand directly onto her. "I'm so sorry, Barbara. I'll wash your clothes for you. Just take them off here." Barbara indicated it was fine. She would change herself. Hearing this, the leading girl began mocking. "Did I hear wrong? Someone like Barbara actually refused my kindness. Take them off quickly. I'll wash them until they're like new and return them to you." Faced with the threat, Barbara closed her eyes tightly. Her trembling left hand tried to unfasten the buttons on her shirt. Under normal circumstances, Luca might have ignored such a scene, because he didn't want to help someone without the will to resist, so that's why he had seen her hair soaking wet before. Luca rotated the dagger in his left hand. "But you're in luck today, Barbara." He threw the dagger directly. The blade pierced through the empty cup in the girl's hand. The screaming girl saw Luca, and her eyes widened. They knew Luca was a dispatched student. "If you don't leave, my fist might land on your noses, because I don't care that you're girls." The hesitant girls left with dissatisfied expressions. Then Barbara called out to Luca and thanked him for the help. The disheveled Barbara looked at him with a flushed face. The corner of Luca's mouth curved into a slight smile. "This way, I guess I'm also close enough to be attacked by robots." The scene shifts. Enrico was gasping heavily, his expression looking very panicked. "That woman is Carissa Kano. You've messed with the wrong person." Luca also knew her name. Her family doesn't seem particularly prominent, does it? Enrico shook his head. "On the surface, that's true, but the Kano family has deep connections with the lower districts. They manipulate gangs behind the scenes and make money through illegal business. Maybe they've already started investigating your information." Luca indicated he didn't need to worry because he came from an orphanage and had no family. Enrico continued to add that Carissa was a woman who always sought revenge, because Barbara's curse had killed her boyfriend. Luca nodded. He hadn't expected there to be so many connections involved. Just then, a voice nearby interrupted the two. When Luca turned around, he found it was Giselle. Luca signaled Enrico to go forward and greet her. "You like her, don't you?" Enrico became tongue-tied. "Say hello to her for me." Then he turned and fled the place. "You see, I made a friend." Enrico seems quite kind, but Giselle felt horrified because she discovered that guy had been lurking around her. Seeing Giselle's reaction, Luca knew he had no chance anymore. The scene shifts. Luca received a summons from Kid, because he had received a report that Luca attacked others with a knife. As Luca had expected, this former Imperial Guard member let her off the hook. "You're like a wolf that fell into a flock of docile sheep. The children here aren't here to learn how to fight." Luca nodded, "But they all act as if they won't be bitten by my fangs." Hearing Luca's words, Kid laughed heartily. "In your view, the students here might seem like sheep, but some of them are monsters in sheep's clothing. Alien monsters more terrifying than wolves." Luca took the dagger from Kid's hand. "I'll remember that." Kid didn't seem to have high expectations either, just smiled. He seemed to know that Luca had been going after monsters from the start, compared to this bland and boring life. He preferred hunting monsters. After leaving the office, Luca deliberately walked toward the sparsely populated gymnasium and warehouse area. No one in the academy didn't know he had helped Barbara. If the rumors were true, malfunctioning robots would attack him. Luca stopped in the middle of the woods. Then 3 people surrounded him. "You're Luca, right?" From their appearance, Luca knew they were the Academy's troublemakers. Carissa asked me to say hello to you. The Kano family's principle is to repay every grudge. You wouldn't report to superiors just because you were beaten by ordinary students, would you? After all, you're a remarkable cadet of the Imperial Guard. After speaking, the three troublemakers burst into laughter. I'll give you one last chance. The dispatch cadet should kneel and apologize to Carissa. She said this way she could let you off. But Luca wasn't afraid of them. The burly man gritted his teeth. That was the signal to switch his prosthetic body to combat mode. The sound of increased output power came from his limbs. He had a high-powered prosthetic body. This was too good for him. However, just then, an infrared beam locked onto several people. A patrolling robot discovered them and issued a warning. The leading troublemaker began breaking out in cold sweat. Are you sure you checked properly? There shouldn't be patrols in this area at this time. He planned to let Luca off for now. The robot nearby kept repeating whether help was needed. The robot's voice was full of static, and its movements were bizarre. A male student pushed the robot aside. The pushed robot staggered. The robot's abnormal reaction made that student take a step back. Before he could react, the robot extended its arm. Its iron fist struck the student's face viciously. The student's head exploded like it was fake. Seeing this scene, the student nearby was completely stunned. The man who had just provoked Luca was trembling with fear. The robot crouched and jumped up, trying to attack another student. Just as it was about to swing its iron fist, Luca kicked the robot away with one foot. After all, if these people all died, he would be blamed. The robot's hard shell had become shattered. The troublemaker nearby pointed at the robot in horror. This is Barbara's curse. The witch's curse really exists. Luca clicked his tongue twice. Akleisian Academy's top students actually believe in curses, but Luca didn't believe in such things. Then Luca walked directly toward the robot. The robot, crouching like a four-legged beast, made a roaring sound from within its body. It was activating maximum power, but couldn't maintain it for more than a few minutes. Luca knew the robot was going to fight him. This wasn't simple malfunction-induced loss of control. This was human handiwork. Luca took a deep breath. He was already eager. The robot kicked off the ground and charged fiercely at Luca. Luca barely dodged the claws with a sidestep. Although the robot was in an out-of-control state, its reaction speed was fast, moving as if equipped with refined combat programs. These separated claws, if caught by them, he'd probably be lying in the hospital for a while. But this was still far from meeting Luca's requirements. He needed more attacks to make his dopamine secrete more. After several dodges, Luca kicked the robot away with one foot. He sensed this one was different from ordinary patrol robots, just as he reached behind her back. In the robot's view, this was likely the action of drawing a gun. The robot immediately lunged at Luca, but he had no gun. Luca threw the knife into the air. The robot immediately looked up, trying to determine what he had thrown. A series of meaningless actions. This was just to increase its computational burden. The more meaningless the actions, the more computation the robot needed to speculate Luca's intentions. The robot's hesitation was only momentary, but that was enough for him. Luca went behind it and directly broke the robot's arm in reverse. Parts and debris from the joint scattered everywhere. Seeing this scene, the troublemaker was startled. Then the robot made electric-like sounds again. You need help? You need help? The corner of Luca's mouth showed a sinister smile. His desire was still unsatisfied. This level of robot couldn't satisfy his craving at all. Just as Luca's gaze fell on the troublemaker, he immediately turned and fled. Meanwhile, security patrol air vehicles flew overhead with sirens blaring. The lights from the vehicle's bottom shone on Luca. The scene shifts to the next day. After that incident, security agencies requested his cooperation with their investigation. Lilian hoped Luca could help them catch criminals hidden among the nobles. Luca thought commoners were also possible. However, Lilian told him it was impossible. They couldn't breach the firewall to enter the Academy's closed network. Just as Luca was about to refuse, Lilian mentioned he was studying Aegis. This made him stronger than his subordinates. Luca was stunned. He hadn't expected his files to record that he was learning Aegis combat techniques. Seeing his reaction, Lilian smiled gently. He could tell Luca some interesting things about Aegis. Users of Aegis Victimo were placed on a special watch list. Of course, only those who learned it formally like him, not street thugs. If you're curious, you can ask the person who taught you Aegis combat techniques. Just then, a voice interrupted Luca. Giselle stormed up to Luca angrily, as if about to slap him. Didn't I tell you not to get close to Barbara? Luca nodded dismissively. I really can't stand seeing a group of people bullying one person. Hearing Luca's dismissive answer, Giselle knew he still wanted to fight. Luca wasn't afraid of Carissa's revenge. On the contrary, he was somewhat looking forward to it. He thought for a moment. I'll go see Carissa and ask her to mediate. If it's me, Carissa should make appropriate concessions. Giselle said something beyond Luca's expectations. He didn't understand why Giselle would try to mediate this situation. However, based on Luca's deduction, Giselle and Carissa had a relationship. She was very confident in her ability to control Carissa. Luca agreed to her plan. Giselle also seemed somewhat surprised. Let's go see Carissa together now. After all, I don't want to attract my superior's attention either. The reason Luca chose to meet Carissa was because he wanted to verify some things. The scene shifts. Carissa told Luca the reason for bullying Barbara. Barbara had killed her boyfriend. But Luca was skeptical about this because she didn't seem like someone who would get into conflicts over such things. Are you sure you didn't deliberately hand your boyfriend over to Barbara to deal with? Then Luca opened the projection. If it doesn't suit your taste, send subordinates to cause trouble. How could I possibly refuse, just like you did to me before? You just need an excuse to torment Barbara. Luca's deliberate provocation made Carissa very angry. She slammed the table hard. You damn bastard. Giselle nearby signaled her to calm down. Carissa still tried to say something. Are you trying to ignore what I'm saying now? Under Giselle's cold expression, Carissa couldn't speak. She avoided Giselle's gaze. Then Giselle signaled Luca to go out first. The relationship between the two was exactly as Luca had guessed. This kind of clear superior-subordinate relationship. But if so, this raised a question. Why didn't Giselle make Carissa stop the bullying? He would stay at the academy for at most 2 months. Investigator Jillian's job was indeed difficult. After all, they couldn't interrogate noble children. Before long, Giselle also came to the corridor. I've suppressed this matter, so please don't cause any more trouble. Also, don't approach Barbara. This time there was a death because you ignored my warning. Luca grinned. I heard that only nobles can operate robots, so I tried it experimentally. After all, Carissa is also one of those who hate Barbara. Hearing this, Giselle signaled him to stop his detective games. Investigators won't easily launch investigations into noble children, will they? Are you mocking me now? Luca looked at Giselle. I'm just stating facts. Speaking of which, Carissa certainly obeys your every word. Giselle avoided Luca's gaze. Family influence is important. Carissa's status isn't enough to ignore what I say, that's all. So you're the one who made Carissa harass Barbara? Giselle's pupils trembled slightly. Luca interrupted her before Giselle could organize his thoughts. Carissa needed a reason to harass Barbara, and she deliberately created this reason. Hearing this, Giselle stepped forward and grabbed Luca's collar. Do you have delusions? I heard that one of the side effects of high-performance prosthetic bodies is abnormal brain function. Neural system overload can lead to mental illness. Take this opportunity to get a psychiatric examination. After Giselle spoke with displeasure, soon she realized she had lost composure. Before leaving, she signaled Luca not to cause trouble. Given the current situation, Luca felt Giselle was the most problematic person, but he always felt something was wrong. Why did Giselle seem so afraid? The scene shifted to lunchtime. A girl with orange gold hair sat beside Luca. Then Barbara handed him a boxed meal. Luca was puzzled. Thank you, Barbara, but what does this mean? Barbara showed a timid expression. You helped me, and because of this, you might have gotten involved in the robot malfunction incident. I'm so glad Luca's okay. During my time at the academy, can I make boxed meals for you? Luca thanked her for this, but he said the boxed meal wasn't necessary. Otherwise, there would be some misunderstandings. After hearing Luca's words, Barbara seemed somewhat hesitant. I don't mind if others misunderstand. Luca guessed whether Barbara liked him. If she had those kinds of feelings for him, that would be troublesome. Just then, Luca asked Barbara a question. You know that contact with me would cause robot malfunctions, so why do you keep approaching me? Do you want me to be attacked? Barbara became somewhat flustered. I don't know why these things happen either. Luca tried to read Barbara's inner thoughts, so he needed to touch her emotions more directly. The reason Carissa persistently harasses you is because of Giselle's instigation. Giselle won't give up until she gets what she wants. However, Barbara's answer shocked Luca, because she already knew this. This time his prediction was wrong. Do you know why Giselle hates you? Meanwhile, Barbara called out to Luca. Barbara looked up with a slight smile. At that moment, Luca felt a chill down his spine. Luca, why should I tell you? Kid's words resurfaced in Luca's mind. Among these people are also monsters in sheep's clothing. Alien monsters more terrifying than wolves. He hadn't expected that monster to be the most inconspicuous Barbara. The scene shifts to 2 days later. Luca told Jillian about his discovery. Carissa deliberately let her boyfriend come into contact with Barbara because she needed a reason to torment Barbara. Gillian confirmed this. It seems having you investigate was the right choice. Then Luca asked if he had the ability to launch an investigation. Jillian spread his hands. I can investigate 1 or 2 people, but if I arrest the wrong person, I'll also suffer a big blow. Luca questioned investigator Jillian's enthusiasm. I didn't expect you to have such a sense of justice. Jillian laughed and shook his head. I just want to lock up that bastard who thinks he can get away with it. Then Luca asked if he had investigated Barbara. Jillian showed a puzzled expression. For a civilian student, breaking through the academy's firewall and accessing the internal network to control robots would be completely impossible. Luca wanted to know why nobles were more suspicious. They can tamper during the manufacturing and distribution process of robots, or install malicious programs in advance. With power and money, bribery is possible. Then Jillian remembered something. Barbara's sponsor is the Custoria family. After Luca finished sharing information with Jillian, he cut off communication. He felt things were connected yet disconnected. He leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. The most direct method would be interrogation. They hadn't received training in interrogation resistance or pain tolerance, but this was impossible, so he could only take the long way around. Luca actively sought out Giselle for the first time. At that moment, he was practicing prosthetic body maintenance. The students were all working earnestly. Even nobles weren't completely without effort. Even standing by a workstation with only one hand, his tool handling was quite skilled. It seemed his admission to Akleisian Academy wasn't entirely based on family background. He was puzzled about what Luca wanted. "What brings you here?" Giselle asked after drinking water. "I missed you." Luca casually made a small joke. Giselle almost spat out her water. "Are you crazy?" She looked at Luca with an expression mixing contempt and disgust. "Let's talk business. I'm busy too." Luca looked around. Only she and Giselle were in the lounge. "From now on, I hope you won't lie to me or hide facts." Giselle didn't like his interrogative tone. "I've accepted the security patrol's investigation request. Soldiers just follow orders. The patrol asked me to cooperate. I had no choice." Hearing the patrol's name, Giselle stopped arguing. "Although I don't want to say this, I must remind you that I'm the daughter of the Imperial Guard captain." This was a warning using her position, but it had no effect on Luca. "You want to drive Barbara out of the academy, so you're tormenting her?" "I found out the Custoria family is sponsoring Barbara." Giselle became somewhat agitated. "Do you know I was the second victim of the curse? Isn't that enough reason for me to hate Barbara? We used to be friends." But Luca thought that if they were really friends, she wouldn't hate Barbara over such things. Giselle prepared to leave. She was obviously hiding something. The security patrol believes the robot malfunctions were human manipulation. From a motive perspective, you're the most likely suspect. Giselle became furious. "You're saying I did it? I'm also a victim of Barbara's curse. Criminals disguising as victims to hide is a common trick. You're from the Custoria family and aspire to be an engineer with knowledge of robot systems. You have the ability to skillfully manipulate AI systems." Hearing this, Giselle turned away. She hoped Luca wouldn't interfere in this matter anymore. But Luca didn't think she did it. He hoped Giselle could tell him what she knew. Luca's intuition told him it might be Barbara. Just then, the door nearby opened. Luca finally closed his mouth. Barbara stood there holding a boxed meal. "Luca, I was looking for you. You weren't in your usual place." Barbara smiled brilliantly. That smile seemed to mock him. Luca was puzzled about how Barbara had found him. If there was tracking, he should have noticed long ago. Was there something he hadn't paid attention to? Why was she acting like a bullying victim again? Right in front of Giselle, the person accused of manipulating everything behind the scenes. Who was it? Luca suppressed his impulse. Locking the door for just 10 minutes, he could dig out all the truth from Barbara's mouth. He desperately restrained the urge to grab Barbara's neck. "Stop pretending to smile, Barbara. That look of yours really annoys me." Barbara's eyes widened in panic, and the corners of her eyes became moist. "Luca, why are you speaking like this? I like you, and you saved me. If there's a misunderstanding, I think we can talk about it." Hearing these words made Luca want to vomit. He threw a chair toward Barbara's side. Seeing this, Giselle signaled Luca to calm down. Up until now, this was just entertainment to break the boring life. "But from now on, I'm serious, Barbara. You're treating me like a fool." Barbara covered her face, making it impossible to tell if she was afraid or excited. Then she tilted her head looking at the two, squeezing out a smile with the corner of her mouth. "Barbara, I don't know what you're talking about." Giselle's face froze. Her shoulders were obviously trembling. Clear fear coiled around her body like a snake. Barbara walked toward the rigid Giselle with light steps. She looked just like an innocent little girl. Walking to the dining table, she put down the food in her hands. "I'll leave the boxed meal here. Enjoy it, Luca." After saying this, she turned around happily, humming a song as she walked toward the door. At this moment, Giselle was still shrouded in fear. Barbara gently brushed across Giselle's hand. "Giselle, nice to see you. Goodbye." In this scene, Giselle was exactly like a little lamb, while Barbara was like a monster from the abyss. Under Luca's gaze, Barbara hummed a song and left happily. After a moment, the lounge became quiet again. Then Giselle sat powerlessly on the ground. Luca couldn't believe it. Why would the young lady of the Custoria family be so terrified, especially when her father was the Imperial Guard's captain? So the real culprit, and their relationship with the innocent. Luca called Giselle's name. She covered her face with both hands. "Don't ask anything. Just quietly spend time and then leave the academy. Please, Luca." Giselle's words no longer contained the previous hostility and contempt, only pure pleading. The scene shifts to several days later. After that incident, Giselle had been avoiding Luca. That day, Luca reported the actual truth to Headless because this matter was gradually getting out of his control. However, Headless gave Luca an unexpected answer. He would leave this matter entirely to Luca to handle. But Luca was puzzled. If the Imperial Guard officially intervened, the truth of the incident would soon come to light. However, Headless intervened indirectly through him, watching and waiting. Moreover, this was an incident involving the captain's daughter. A scene appeared in Luca's mind. Someone was manipulating everything behind the scenes, and he was just a pawn in their hands. This was the role of a soldier, but it made him very unhappy. As expected, Giselle still wouldn't answer Luca's calls. Barbara's curse. His intuition told him this was Barbara's self-directed performance. As Lilian said, Barbara from the lower classes would find it difficult to manipulate robots. Luca accelerated his thinking, piecing together fragments of events from multiple angles, trying all possible hypotheses one by one, filtering out the most reasonable situations. Through repeated deduction and elimination, the tangled clues gradually unraveled. The final answer was only one. Giselle and Barbara were accomplices in the robot malfunctions. But now he had to find Giselle first. So Luca contacted Enrico. "Did you help me speak well of me to Giselle?" Luca smiled slightly. "Of course." Soon Enrico had arranged to meet Giselle. I like you, Miss Giselle." Hearing this, Giselle frowned. "I'll be direct. I have no interest in you. Not only am I not interested, your existence makes me uncomfortable. Please don't wander around me for no reason anymore." Enrico stood there looking bewildered. Then suddenly he started crying. He ran out of the garden as if escaping. Luca hadn't expected her to say it to that extent. "If Enrico needs my help in the future, I'll help him without hesitation. After all, I have a conscience too." Giselle prepared to leave the garden. After confirming Enrico had completely disappeared, Luca came out. His appearance made Giselle frown. She had guessed it was Luca's scheme. Giselle couldn't tolerate such harassment, so she planned to report Luca's rudeness to her father. But Luca's words made Giselle stagger as if struck, because he had already told the captain in advance. "You actually told father about this?" Giselle's reaction was more intense than he had expected. Giselle paced in circles in confusion, falling into panic. From her reaction, her fear of Barbara had already taken deep root. Giselle stepped forward and grabbed Luca's collar. "Everything I've worked for until now vanished instantly, all because of you. If only you had never appeared, none of this would have happened. It's all your fault." Luca indicated that everything still had a chance. "Tell me what you know and I'll help you." Giselle was very dejected. "This is our family's internal problem. You're just a student. What if I become a member of the Castoria family?" Giselle looked up at Luca with moist eyes. "What did you just say?" "Although I'm just a student, why would someone as important as you come to serve as my guide? Isn't that strange? Although it's embarrassing for me to say this, I'm considered a once-in-several-years genius among students, and I recently received a military merit medal. The captain thinks highly of me. If I become a member of the Castoria family, my status won't be too low either. Whatever difficulties you face, I'll support you. Only by successfully resolving this matter will my chances of becoming the guard captain's adopted son increase. If our interests align, we can naturally trust each other." Giselle was gasping heavily. Her body trembled from excessive tension, almost unable to stand. After hesitating for a long time, she finally decided to speak. "I manipulated the patrol robots. Barbara's curse was created by me." Giselle spoke the truth about curses and villains. Barbara and Giselle's connection began 3 years ago. Barbara was Giselle's first friend. Not just someone she knew, but truly someone who could become a friend. Barbara was a girl with strong social skills who loved to smile. Her unique, cheerful personality deeply fascinated Giselle. At that time, there was a boy who was very proactive toward Barbara. Barbara was popular because of her cheerful personality and sweet smile. She thought Barbara wasn't interested in that boy, but she told Giselle she liked him. Giselle didn't want her only friend to be taken away by the boy, so she wanted to play a prank on him. She made a fake robot. Giselle used the robot to threaten that boy. She recorded voice files in the robot, commanding him to stay away from Barbara and chasing him around at night. However, that boy fell and suffered a serious head injury, even having to drop out due to after effects. But as the accident escalated, an investigation had begun. Barbara was the first to discover it was Giselle who did it, because she often assembled robots in front of her. Things had developed beyond control. Just then, Barbara told her there was a good solution. She suggested Giselle also become a victim, so she wouldn't be suspected. This is why Giselle became the second victim. At that time, Barbara gave her a chip and told her to install it on the robot. Logically, external input shouldn't be able to control artificial intelligence. But for some reason, from then on, robots began seeking out Giselle, malfunctioning and losing control. She nearly became the second victim. Giselle bit her lip. Barbara became strange from that time on. She started making strange demands of me. For instance, for the perfect crime, she had to isolate Barbara at the academy. She also said there needed to be regular victims. From a third-person perspective, Luca could see that Giselle had already fallen into Barbara's trap. She deliberately induced Giselle, causing a situation that could have been resolved peacefully to worsen instead, so that Giselle couldn't escape her clutches. At this moment, Giselle's terminal made noise. The terminal's security level should be high, but her terminal was hacked. Our secret. You told that man, traitor, Giselle, my dear Giselle. Luca pricked up his ears to listen carefully. The problem wasn't just the terminal's sound. There seemed to be faint propeller sounds as well. His intuition and senses issued strong warnings. They had to leave here immediately. Soon a gunshot rang out. Luca grabbed Giselle and rolled to the side, then rolled behind a nearby stone pillar. Damn, that was the slight gunshot characteristic of a silencer. Luca looked down and found finger-sized holes in his body. He had to stop the bleeding now. He tore his jacket to pieces. then bandaged the wound. Based on the sound just now, Luca determined that what attacked them should be a drone. If he moved at high speed, he could easily handle the situation, but doing so might worsen his injuries. Now the only weapon he had was a knife. Due to the silencer, no one seemed to realize what had happened. He could only rely on himself to get out of here. "I'm going to flatten your nose, damn bastard." Coming to her senses, Giselle noticed Luca was injured. Don't the Imperial Guard members feel pain when shot? This stunned Luca. It seemed his panic had lowered his IQ. Meanwhile, the drone fired at them again. But Luca had no way to fight back because he couldn't determine the drone's position. Just then, Luca noticed Giselle's makeup. Ordinary girls would carry makeup mirrors with them. Then Luca asked if she had brought a mirror. Fortunately, Luca guessed correctly. He used the reflection to clearly confirm the drone's position. The drone's black matte surface made it almost blend into the night sky. Luca spun around and jumped out from behind the marble pillar. Using the centrifugal force of rotation, he threw the knife like a throwing blade. A silver trajectory flew out in a straight line. The knife flew toward the drone like a missile. The drone fell like a bird with torn wings, while shooting wildly in all directions. At this moment, Luca had already hidden behind another pillar. Luca hadn't expected his equipment to malfunction too. The screen flickered a few times before displaying an error message. He also asked Giselle nearby, but he got the same answer as himself. Both intranet and internet channels were no longer functioning properly. Just then, Giselle's terminal transmitted static. "Giselle, I wanted to protect you. Why did you betray me? And Luca, I like you, so I hope you'll despise me even more." Luca snatched Giselle's terminal and crushed it forcefully. The tiny parts fell from his palm like powder. No need to listen to a crazy bitch's words. This time, Luca didn't continue speaking. Even if Giselle was the guard captain's daughter, she was still a civilian. She couldn't say more. Someone was manipulating all this at a level higher than hers. Luca planned to take Giselle to a safe place, but he saw a familiar figure at the garden entrance. "Felix, is this a superior's order?" Felix confirmed this. "Looks like you got special treatment again." "I didn't hear a word about this operation," but Giselle found it hard to accept. "Was all this my father's plan?" Luca and Felix were soldiers. It didn't matter if they were used as expendables or tools. However, if one's own father thought their children could be abandoned, anyone would feel uneasy. Her emotional turmoil was understandable. Meanwhile, Felix noticed a wound on Luca's body. Luca smiled bitterly. "If I don't get treatment soon, I might become a corpse by tomorrow morning." Felix kept the knife for himself and threw the gun to the injured Luca. Felix took out his terminal to report to superiors. Now Luca and Giselle. Felix couldn't complete his report. A bullet shattered Felix's terminal and also blew away his right hand. Seeing this, the two quickly dispersed and pressed against the wall at the garden entrance. Gunshots came from nearby, but Luca still couldn't sense them. A drone that even the Imperial Guard trainees couldn't detect. Barbara didn't have enough experience to make such advanced things. In other words, this wasn't the real Barbara. Just then, a mechanical voice rang out. "If I had aimed for your heads just now, you'd already be dead." Luca and Felix quickly exchanged hand signals, adjusting their plan. As Luca talked to the assailant, Felix would circle around for a sneak attack. The plan was formed in an instant. Felix took off his shoes. He moved without a sound. "You know who we are, and you still want to chat?" Hearing this, the enemy chuckled. "Of course I do. Aren't you the lovely Imperial Guard cadets? Let's get straight to the point. Hand over Giselle Custoria." Luca tried to stall for time. "You're a soldier too, you should understand what I mean," but the man's words struck Luca as strange. He said you, not you all. The attacker knew Felix was circling around. Just as Luca was about to cover for Felix, he heard the sound of a bone snapping. The attacker was choking Felix by the neck. He was wearing a full-body combat suit, one equipped with camouflage color-changing technology. No wonder he couldn't sense the enemy's position. Felix was defeated with ease. This meant their opponent was at least at the level of the Imperial Guard. This could be a bit difficult. Giselle grabbed Luca's hand, but Luca quickly pushed it away. "The moment I start fighting, you run as fast as you can. Don't look back. I'll buy as much time as possible." Just as Giselle was about to speak, Luca covered her mouth with his palm. "There's no time to argue. Do as I say." The instant Giselle started running, Luca rushed out, firing toward the enemy's position. His speed was impressive, but the bullets were too slow. The attacker looked at Luca. "I'd rather not kill two juniors in one night." The word momentarily caught Luca's attention, and in the next instant, the enemy was already behind him. Luca crossed his arms to block the attacker's kick. So, he was a former member of the Imperial Guard. No wonder he was so skilled for a terrorist. In a fight that requires total concentration, I got distracted. How pathetic of me, Luca. The enemy wants to eliminate me now. He thinks that after killing me, he'll have enough time to catch Giselle. Luca's intuition told him that if he fought the enemy head-on, he would surely die. So he had to think of another way. The Aegis combat technique. Its essence lies in extreme analysis and insight, at the risk of brain damage. It starts with extending the five senses, perceiving everything as if controlling the surrounding environment. There was no wasted motion in Luca's movements. He saw Felix's sword, which had fallen to the ground. Then, Luca threw his pistol backward like a boomerang. The impacted sword ricocheted to a spot behind Luca. As he caught the sword, he swung at the enemy. The enemy exclaimed in surprise, "Are you a user of the Aegis combat style?" Luca frowned at the words. How could he know that? The moment Luca landed, the man brought a slash down on him, and Luca could only parry with his sword. His lower body was wide open. Luca knew the enemy was holding back, otherwise he'd already be dead. The man showed his appreciation for Luca's ability to use the Aegis combat method. "Stand down, boy. I don't want to kill you. If you knew who I was, your superiors wouldn't blame you. The Imperial Guard doesn't teach you to sacrifice your lives needlessly." Luca had a good guess as to his identity. An anti-Empire terrorist organization. A breath escaped Luca's lips. Perhaps this would be my last. But his taunts gave me time to think. My wounds, his identity, and that whole business with the combat style, none of that matters to me right now. From now on, I am the sword. There are only two outcomes: either I break, or I cut the enemy down before I do. Luca gripped the hilt with both hands and swung down with all his might. The man nimbly sidestepped his attack. To reach this level at your age, yet you're willing to give your life for the Empire. The unbearable acceleration twisted Luca's waist, and blood began to seep out. But Luca's attacks were still too slow for him. "Did you think I couldn't kill you?" Luca's body was already running on empty. He could only use his sword as a support to keep himself standing. The Empire is the Empire, but your tone itself is hard to tolerate. The man shrugged and started to laugh loudly. "I like your rebellious nature. Boy, you're definitely more on our side. My name is Rick Kaiser, and I'm a Republican. To Luca, all Republicans were terrorists. Sorry, I can't understand anything unless you stop barking like a dog." Rick didn't answer. He seemed annoyed, perhaps even furious. He gave a light hop, and then he vanished from Luca's sight. Instinct made Luca quickly guard his chest, but his mechanical arm couldn't take the impact. Amidst a flurry of flying parts and debris, Luca saw a fist shaped like an awl. Everything unfolded in slow motion, just as Luca tried to attack with his leg. His leg was ripped off. He lifted Luca by the neck with one hand. "This is your last chance. Beg me to spare you, and I'll let you live." Luca gave him a faint smile. Then his lips moved. He spat right in the man's face. "I like that tough attitude of yours. If you survive this, say hello to Kinu for me." With those words, the attacker tightened his grip. The last thing Luca heard that day was the sound of his own neck breaking. For an organic human, a broken neck usually means death. Usually. Felix barely managed to force out a sound. "Luca, it hurts, you idiot. Of course it's going to hurt if you try to turn your neck." Luca gave Felix a wry smile. He was beyond recovery. Felix's brain damage was severe because his neck had been broken for too long. Luca, on the other hand, was lucky. He heard that shortly after the attacker took him down, 4 Imperial Guard members appeared with Giselle. Prompt first aid saved him from brain damage. If they hadn't administered it immediately, he wouldn't be here. Just then, the door opened. Imperial Guard Captain Headless walked in. To be precise, he was here to see Luca. Felix could no longer communicate. The guard captain bent down and sat in a chair. He glanced at Felix, a complex emotion flickering in his eyes. "Felix has fulfilled his duty," Luca said, mentioning Felix first before giving his report. Then Luca verbally reported the incident's details to the guard captain. After hearing Luca's account, the guard captain stated that no written report would be necessary for this incident. Rick Kaiser's real name is Rick Silva Nunez, one of the Empire's most wanted criminals. It was the first time Luca had heard the name. Not all wanted criminals are publicly announced, especially those connected to the Empire's blemishes. Luca was taken aback. The Empire's blemishes? The Empire must be flawless. To think such words would come from the mouth of the guard captain. Headless explained the situation to Luca, because he was now qualified to hear it. Operation Juliet was a plan that began 5 years ago, with the objective of approaching the command structure of the anti-Empire terrorist group, Nemesis. Luca was confused as to why the goal was to approach rather than eliminate. The guard captain pushed a terminal device in front of him. "No matter how many times we cut it down, it will continue to grow back somewhere else. It's meaningless if we can't pull it out by the roots." Luca asked again, "Since we failed to capture Rick alive, does that mean the operation was a failure?" Hearing this, the wrinkles at the corners of the guard captain's mouth deepened. "We achieved a brilliant success. We managed to plant our agent in the core of Nemesis." Luca didn't understand what he meant at first. "Barbara is one of ours. Nemesis recruited her for her exceptional hacking skills. Our efforts to ensure the enemy recognized Barbara's talents paid off. However, I had no idea at the time that she would be so insane." Luca gripped the bed rail tightly. How many people had their superiors deceived for this operation? Among them was even the guard captain's own daughter, Giselle, who had long been tormented by Barbara. Were they all just disposable pawns? Luca couldn't help but ask, did Giselle know? The question starkly revealed his emotions. She knew nothing. "And it's better if she never does. Do you know why I'm telling you all this?" The guard captain's eyes narrowed. A chill ran down Luca's spine. Elimination. That was the first thought that came to his mind. Even if I am exceptional in the end, I'm just a low-level grunt who can be discarded at any time, especially someone like me with no background, who is even easier to dispose of. Just then, Headless pushed an electronic document in front of Luca. The tension in Luca instantly gave way to a wry smile. It was an adoption document, signed by Guard Captain Headless Custoria. Only the space for his name was blank. Welcome to the Custoria family, Luca. The scene shifts to several months later. A robot is removing the external spine from Luca's back. Blood-stained screws are placed one by one onto a tray. He almost had to live with an external spine for the rest of his life. Luca stood up and put on his cadet uniform jacket. Felix was still lying in bed, wearing a neck brace. He called out Luca's name intermittently. "Are you leaving?" Luca nodded. "I have to go." Felix squeezed out a sentence with all his might. "May your future be filled with good fortune." Luca nodded again. He would keep moving forward. Felix's story ends here, that's all. But I will remember Felix and those who have died. The scene changes to the Imperial Guard Education Center. Luca, walking down a corridor, is lost in thought. He had checked the Empire's most wanted list, sorted by recent updates. Barbara's name was prominently displayed, a spy operation meticulously planned by the Empire to infiltrate the terrorist organization Nemesis. Her personality still made Luca's heart race, because Luca felt her actions weren't merely an act. She was undoubtedly a twisted individual, but even her personality, was that also designed by the Empire specifically for this mission? In short, nothing was a coincidence. Back at the Academy, I was merely treading a path laid out by my superiors, mistakenly believing it was my own choice and will. The more I learned, the more unfathomable the Empire seems. My encounter with Kinu and learning the Aegis combat technique was probably part of their plan as well. All sorts of thoughts began to surface in Luca's mind, until he had to force himself to calm down. "Enough, Luca. You can't think like those dissidents. It's all just my speculation and delusion. The guard captain telling me the truth about this incident might have been a test. He wanted to see if my loyalty to the Empire and my convictions as a soldier had wavered. But the opportunity to change my life has arrived. Luca Custoria." As the door opened, Kinu's office appeared. "Did you enjoy your youth at the Academy?" By now, Luca was used to his way of speaking. It was so enjoyable I nearly never made it back to the training facility. A shame about Felix. He was an excellent student. Did he really feel sorry? The words almost escaped Luca's throat. Luca took a sip of the tea in his hand. "Rick asked me to send his regards to you, Instructor. He said he's doing well," Kinu replied calmly, without so much as raising an eyebrow. "Rick Silva Nunez. I'm glad to hear he's doing well. I never thought he'd become a terrorist." Luca frowned. He used such a familiar tone for a terrorist. "You two were close?" It turned out he and Kinu had entered the Guard in the same class, though they had long lost contact. "It seems you relayed Rick's regards to the Guard Captain." Luca paused. "Because those words could get the Instructor executed on the spot. I wanted to at least confirm it with my own eyes before reporting." "What is the real reason you're trying so hard to curry favor with me, Luca?" Luca sorted through the recent events in his mind. These people almost all knew about Aegis Bictima. It was more than just a combat technique, it held a deeper meaning. Luca didn't beat around the bush. "So, what exactly is the Aegis technique?" Kinu's brow furrowed slightly. "You're that curious?" This was also why the terrorist Rick hadn't completely smashed Luca's head in. He left Luca a chance at survival, merely breaking his neck. Kinu looked out the window and took a sip of his now cold tea. Then he smiled, as if he had been waiting for Luca's question. "You've reached the core of the matter faster than I expected, Luca Custoria. For a low-level grunt, you know too much. You should understand what that means, right?" Luca certainly understood. The more you know, the more dangerous it is. Without Headless as his backer, he would have likely been eliminated already. In the year 3518, Noel Maritzka, the first in the Empire's history to lead a rebel uprising. He was the leader of the rebels and the founder of Aegis, proposing the original tactical theory. Noel believed a full-scale assault on the Empire was futile. Therefore, he decided to fight back with guerrilla warfare. That's how Aegis Bictima was born. A cold sweat broke out on Luca. The theoretical basis of the combat method he had learned originated from an act of treason. To be precise, what the Empire wanted to cover up was Noel's achievements as a combat theorist. But the rebels adopted Aegis as their strategy and continued to fight. After hearing Kinu's words, many questions surfaced in Luca's mind at once. This made a lot of sense. When applied to guerrilla warfare, the drawbacks of the Aegis combat method were completely non-existent. Their lives were under constant threat, so neurological damage was no longer an issue. And because they lacked a unified standard method for managing their forces, a more flexible combat approach was needed. Kinu affirmed Luca's deductions. Even after countless operations to annihilate the rebels, Noel and a few key members always managed to find a way to escape. So they scattered to every corner of the Empire, recruiting new soldiers to fight and attack the Empire's vital facilities. It didn't matter if they were caught, they could just cut off their own tails. Luca could picture it in his mind. The rebels could likely disguise themselves as civilians with little effort. Since their control implants were designed for non-combatants, no one would guess they were major rebel leaders. But users of Aegis could fight without high-powered cybernetics. They could easily pass any routine inspection. So that's why Rick gave me a chance to live. He now understood why the Empire kept a list of Aegis users. How did the Empire suppress Noel's rebellion back then? Keanu spread his hands. Everyone suspected was killed. Luca didn't ask how many innocent people died. The number would be beyond his imagination. Any user of Aegis could have been killed. Luca wondered if the Empire would cover up this part of history. They didn't deliberately hide it, but they didn't elaborate on it either. If you're not interested in history, you'd never know the truth. The betrayal of Imperial Army hero Noel Maritska. The Empire's mass slaughter. Keanu was an instructor for the Imperial Guard, proficient in the rebels' combat methods. Luca looked directly at Keanu. Did the guard captain send me here because he thinks you have connections to the terrorists? Keanu clapped his hands lightly twice. Correct, Luca. If you can find or uncover evidence of my collusion with Nemesis, you'll leapfrog into the core of the Imperial Guard. Luca stared intently at Keanu but couldn't see through him. I don't believe the instructor is colluding with terrorists. You might think that, but the guard captain thinks differently. For the sake of your future, I'll give you a little hint. Go investigate my tracks in the lower sectors. Keanu's words sounded like a provocation. Luca wondered how much Headless knew and why he would send him on this chase. Luca slowly rose to his feet. I will report what I heard today to the guard captain. Keanu stood up and personally opened the door to see Luca out. After leaving the main training building, Luca ran forward without stopping. He only stopped when he reached the end, trying to catch his breath and calm his emotions. Damn it. Everyone is using me. The guard captain and Keanu are both using me to probe each other's intentions. How much longer do I have to walk this tightrope? It was becoming harder and harder to figure out who Keanu was. What is he exactly? There's no concrete evidence to be found through legal channels. But I won't let myself be manipulated like this. I didn't climb this far for this. Luca decided to go to the lower sector Keanu mentioned to look for clues. Headless sent Luca to investigate Keanu because he suspected his ties to terrorists, and Keanu himself remained carefree despite the suspicions surrounding him. And what he said to Luca, why would he point Luca in the right direction? Could he be deliberately setting a trap to eliminate Luca? Or was this just a test, a trick by Keanu and the Empire to measure Luca's loyalty? Luca made a promise to himself not to let them manipulate him. Now, he had to prepare to trace Keanu's steps. Luca's first step was to report his conversation with Keanu to Headless. Rick and Keanu seemed to primarily handle unofficial missions during the same period. There must be some kind of relationship between them. You must be curious too, right? If Keanu is so suspicious, why has he been allowed to roam free until now? Indeed, Luca was very curious, but survival came first. If there are reasons I'm not meant to know, I'll keep my ears shut. Headless crossed his arms and closed his eyes. Then he leaned back in his chair and opened them. I've decided to trust you, Luca. This order to investigate Keanu comes from a department higher than the Imperial Guard. The higher-ups believe that through Keanu, we can get close to the core of the terrorist organization Nemesis. Luca was puzzled. Why place such a dangerous person in a position as important as an instructor? If we didn't give him the instructor position, he would leave. Of course, Keanu would never leave the guard alive, and he's very competent as an instructor. Hearing this, Luca couldn't help but swallow hard. I've been around Keanu for a considerable amount of time, but honestly, I haven't seen any weaknesses. He's a man of strict self-discipline who never reveals his inner thoughts. Headless gestured for Luca to do his best, that he was the only one suitable for the job. Over the past decade, quite a few cadets have been assigned to Keanu, but none have gotten as close to him as you have, Luca. It seems even Keanu holds you in high regard. Luca chewed on the guard captain's words. He could no longer escape from this matter. I need a higher level of authority than a cadet, a higher level clearance for database access, and a certain amount of funding for the investigation. The scene shifts to 3 days later. Luca boarded the Custoria family's flying car. After Luca's adoption papers were approved, Headless took him home to meet everyone. Headless asked casually, "Are you nervous?" Luca admitted it. It would be a lie to say I'm not. I'm trembling. After Luca made his request to Headless, the higher-ups gave him a pass for free travel between the upper and lower sectors, authorization to carry personal weapons and an investigative fund, and access to a higher clearance database. He didn't ask for more because he hadn't done enough yet, but these things were far from sufficient. He could be consumed at any moment, so he had to give his all in everything he did. He was a soldier. He hoped to die on the battlefield, not in some underwater conspiracy, especially after knowing things beyond his station. There was nothing Headless could do either. If the higher-ups cancel the mission, he doesn't know how many people he'll have to deal with, including Luca, of course. But Headless told him not to worry. As long as it was within his authority, he would do his best. That was why he had to bring Luca into the Custoria family. And that decision meant Luca had to entrust his life to Headless. I don't like these formalities either, but since we're family now, we should at least greet each other. If you can tell me how to behave in front of the other family members, I will do as you say. Hearing Luca's words, the guard captain gave an amused smile. He stroked his chin, and after a moment of thought, he spoke. Just act as you normally would. It will be a new stimulus for the children. Luca couldn't figure out Hellas's intentions, but if he wanted protection, he had to play by his rules, even if those rules were annoying. As time passed, the flying car arrived above the mansion. Hellas gazed out the window. Although I spent my childhood here, I don't have many feelings for it. The Castoria family mansion, located on the outskirts of the capital city of Akbalan. The mansion was surrounded by an unsettling red wasteland. Only within the mansion grounds were there green plants and water, looking like an oasis in the desert. The balance thrusters on the bottom of the flying car were making fine adjustments. It was Luca's first time stepping into a nobleman's residence. The scene changes, and Luca appears in a room. Hellas gestured for him to rest first. And then we'll deal with the rest of the matters all at once. Everyone was busy trying to curry favor with Hellas. The people here spoke insincere words, and he was already feeling a bit tired. The social dynamics were no different from the lower sectors. Is this really the life I dreamed of? Just then, there was a knock on Luca's door. A familiar young woman walked in. You really became a member of the Castoria family. The speaker was Giselle. She had tied her deep blue hair back, and every time it swayed, it was as if the night sky was rippling. I must apologize for my behavior back then. I was overcome with emotion. As a member of the Castoria family, I shouldn't have acted that way. Luca hadn't paid any mind to the previous incident. It's normal for anyone to panic in that situation, so don't worry about it. Giselle smiled bitterly. I went to see Felix too. He didn't recognize me. Giselle seemed to be blaming herself for Felix's condition. You can express your gratitude, but you don't need to feel guilty. Felix was just fulfilling his duty as an Imperial Guard. Luca wasn't trying to comfort her. He was just stating the facts, as he wasn't one for sentimentality. Giselle pursed her lips. I know your personality well. Like a blue flame. It seems cold, but it's actually hotter than a red one. Luca could sense that Giselle's attitude was different from before. That prickly feeling was mostly gone, which made sense, as he had risked his life to save her. Just then, she called out to Luca again. Do you remember what you said back then? You said if you became a Castoria, you would support me. Luca affirmed it. That wasn't a lie. Besides the guard captain, you're the only member of the Castoria family I've had a serious conversation with, and I believe you're someone I can make a deal with. Now this is more like a noble lady of the Empire, knowing how to fight for her own interests. Giselle walked over to a nearby table and connected her terminal to its holographic display. The people you need to be most wary of are my two elder brothers, the first and the second. Your appearance has made them feel a huge sense of crisis. Luca couldn't quite understand. I'm just an adopted son. Giselle refuted his view. Among father's children right now, only you meet the criteria of an elite soldier. Even without blood ties, your position is enough to make them wary. After all, the Castorias are a military family. Luca seemed to understand their sense of crisis. Everyone is afraid I'll take their position. Then what do you think? Do you have any intention of becoming the head of the family? Giselle was taken aback by Luca's words. You really have no interest in becoming the next head of the family? Luca looked straight into her eyes. I don't have to tell you everything. Giselle's cold words were just like when they first met. Luca told her he had no intention of becoming the family head. The name Castoria is enough for me, but if someone tries to step on me, I won't just sit back and take it. As for what happens after, that's none of my business. If the opportunity comes, seize it, Giselle. This is a piece of advice from your big brother. At first, Giselle found the term big brother absurd, but she soon smiled. That radiant smile of hers was rare, and thus, all the more precious. If that day truly comes, will you support me? I promised you. As long as you are not my enemy, I have no reason to dislike or harm you. After hearing Luca's words, Giselle extended her hand. Then I'll consider you an ally. A pleasure to be working with you, brother Luca. This is the first and last time I'll call you that. Good. I'm not too fond of such mushy titles either. As the clock on the wall chimed with a classic sound, it was now dinner time. Because it was a special occasion, a banquet was being held. Soon, Luca changed into a set of noble's clothes and appeared in the living room. From his seating position, Luca could discern the hierarchy of the family members. The second son of the Castoria family, Joel. The eldest son, Nicholas. The matriarch of the Castoria family, Eva. So you're Luca. I've heard a lot about you. On the surface, she appeared gentle and kind, but her voice held a coldness, even a hint of a sting. Then she motioned for Luca to find a seat. Giselle, at his side, whispered a reminder to Luca, don't give them a reason to find fault with you, because the family head is not one to care about such things. As the main doors opened again, Hellas's figure soon appeared before everyone. Let us begin the meal. But before the meal could begin, a prayer was required. After Hellas finished his prayer, the meal commenced. The clinking of cutlery filled the air. Just as Luca had expected, all eyes were on him. Just a few minutes ago, on the way to the banquet, Giselle had told Luca to be careful. They had likely already gathered intelligence on Luca. Nicholas couldn't use high-performance cybernetics, so he became an official. But thanks to his abilities, he was able to get most of the family on his side. As for Joel, he wasn't as capable, but he believed he could still be the next successor because he was a soldier. The more conservative family members supported Joel. As a fellow soldier, Luca would inevitably be seen as an enemy by him, so he would try to embarrass Luca over his origins or his manners. From the moment Luca picked up his utensils, Joel had been watching him. Of course, Luca knew this common etiquette, but he thought of what Headless had said in the flying car. But that was probably not what Headless wanted me to do for him. Luca looked at Headless, or rather his father, at his side. He would follow his father's lead. Giselle glanced nervously at Luca beside her. Because Luca had speared a piece of cut meat with his fork and stuffed it into his mouth voraciously. As expected, Joel immediately spoke up. Luca feigned a bewildered expression. "What's wrong, big brother Joel? This food is delicious." Joel put on a false smile. "I feel it's my duty as your elder brother to point out your dining etiquette. I don't know how you lived before, but basic manners must be observed. This concerns the reputation of the Custoria family." He was so eager to discredit Luca that he couldn't even see this was an act. He must be very nervous, because Luca was an elite warrior. On the other hand, Luca wasn't sure if Nicholas had seen through his act. He thinks Joel and I will split the conservative supporters. In any case, he's the real threat I need to watch out for. Luca interrupted Joel's words. Compared to someone who has served for 10 years without receiving a single cross-sword medal, I, a mere cadet, have at least earned a military merit medal. I think I can bring more glory to the Custoria family than these dining manners. Hearing Luca's words, several relatives couldn't help but chuckle, quickly covering their mouths. Joel's face instantly turned beet red, as if hot water had been thrown on it. I may not have learned etiquette, but I'm very good at fighting. After all, I learned under an outstanding Imperial Guard captain. Luca stopped teasing Joel, and Joel, you should know when to stop. The eldest son, Nicholas, intervened at the right moment. He skillfully attacked Joel while showcasing his own magnanimity. Joel tried to defend himself resentfully, but Nicholas cut him off directly. Our new brother has known dining etiquette all along. He was just pretending not to know, wasn't he, Luca? Luca properly set down his utensils. He elegantly cut a piece of meat with his knife and fork and brought it to his mouth. I learned it beforehand, but forgot just now. After all, it's my first time at such an event, so I was a little nervous. Joel had fallen for Luca's trap and become a laughingstock. Having seized control of the conversation, Nicholas continued. I heard you received the 7th class Cross-Sword Military Merit Medal. I'm not a soldier, so I don't know much about it, but I hear it's quite rare for a cadet. Luca affirmed it. Any Imperial Guard soldier has one. It's nothing to brag about. Although I am the eldest son, I was born with a weak constitution and couldn't become a soldier, which has always made me feel like I've let my father down. Now that we have such an outstanding soldier like you, I feel much more at ease. Joel must have been burning with rage inside. He slammed a fist on the dining table. Brother, were you just saying that I'm not good enough? Joel had fallen into another pit dug deliberately by Nicholas. It seems you've misunderstood, Joel. As your older brother, I know your abilities better than anyone. I'm confident you will achieve great things in the future. Joel also felt frustrated. Because his father was the guard captain, his superiors were always overly cautious, not letting him participate in actual combat. It was the last shred of Joel's pride. To some extent, this might be true. Knowing Headless's personality, even if his son died in battle, he wouldn't hold the superiors responsible. But those petty individuals would naturally read the situation and act accordingly. However, it didn't matter. This was exactly what Headless wanted him to do. As a father, Luca understood deeply that Headless was genuinely smiling from the heart. Eva's intervention calmed the conflict, and afterward came dinner followed by a small reception. When the reception began, Eva introduced Luca to everyone, calling him Luca during the introduction. She said Luca's former name felt too much like it belonged to the lower districts, so the original name became a nickname. Though she didn't mind it, various relatives came to greet Luca, but he couldn't remember any of their names. The recent conflict with Joel had allowed Luca to demonstrate his presence. Everyone should be clear now that he wasn't someone easy to deal with. After greeting Giselle, Luca's first day at the Custoria household came to an end. Luca was lying fast asleep on an unfamiliar bed. Suddenly, someone was entering his room. The door lock slid open silently. Unexpectedly, it was Headless. Quick response indeed. My apologies for this late-night visit, Luca. I needed to maintain a neutral appearance. Headless shook the wine bottle and sat in a chair, which somewhat surprised Luca. In principle, Imperial Guard members are prohibited from smoking and drinking. Doctors and scientists say such substances have negative effects on the nervous and hormonal systems that have been adjusted for combat. You want a drink? Luca declined Headless's offer. I don't want to add unnecessary risks. Learning Aegis combat techniques is already enough. Headless smiled as if he had expected this response and took a sip of wine. As a senior member of the Imperial Guard, let me give you some advice. The heart needs some irrational, inefficient impurities to endure longer. That's the key to opening the box of humanity. Luca asked Headless with confusion. Is that something necessary for a soldier? People who speak like you are often the first to be devoured by the Legion. Luca's heart suddenly trembled. You seem drunk, Captain. Of course, Luca knew he wasn't actually drunk. Headless smiled. I'll say it again, this is just advice. Consider it a gift for becoming family. Cultivate a hobby or habit unrelated to combat, one that might even hinder fighting. Hellas stood up and patted Luca's shoulder. Today was the most human side of him that Luca had ever seen. He gave me advice that brought him no benefit whatsoever. Just like a father to his son, simply honing myself to razor sharpness has already left me exhausted. I have no energy left to bear additional impurities. Perhaps there are already many impurities within me. Now to add more, I don't want to become someone dependent or easily angered, someone undisciplined who creates trouble due to personal emotions. If not, why would an Imperial Guard captain say such things? Luca couldn't understand his intentions. The scene shifts to the second day. Luca's second day at the main house was also unpleasant. The only thing that brought him joy was visiting the family's armory. Is guiding through the weapons vault your responsibility? Giselle confirmed this. That's why she studied mechanical engineering at the academy. In the Castoria family, managing and maintaining the armory is women's responsibility, because some things cannot be entrusted to outsiders. Currently, my mother manages the weapons vault, and I will take over in the future. Luca thought of his stepmother Eva. She was the epitome of a noble lady in his mind, someone who didn't seem like she would get oil on her hands. In Giselle's view, her mother was extremely capable. Now, father's armor and weapons are all maintained under her supervision. Luca asked with confusion, don't nobles often arrange marriages? If relationships deteriorate, this could easily be tampered with. Giselle nodded matter-of-factly. Exactly, that's why we have mothers handle maintenance. It's a family tradition that demonstrates deep trust. Listening to Giselle's words, Luca stopped in his tracks, as if mesmerized, gazing up at the ancient armor. Giselle tilted her head, looking at Luca. This was a suit of armor bearing scattered legion markings. Most striking were its horned head and asymmetrical arms. The right arm was longer and larger than the left, seemingly modified to operate some special weapon. Giselle stood before the horned armor suit, introducing its name. This is an item related to our family's history, a full-type mecha suit, Celia. This is the exclusive armor suit of Agatha, founder of the Castorias, the only one-of-a-kind mecha in existence. Luca looked up, imprinting Celia's image in his mind like taking a photograph. The scene shifts. The Castoria family had an annex called the Music Hall, where elderly individuals who had stepped back from the front lines resided. They couldn't directly exercise influence. After all, elders were merely advisors. Their role was to prevent the family head from losing control. The elders didn't seem to participate directly in decision-making. If they did, the family head would become a mere puppet. Hellas explained the Music Hall elders to Luca. There were 7 of them in total, a number that was neither too many nor too few. Luca then asked if anyone opposed his adoption. 2 opposed, 4 remained silent, and only 1 supported. Silence meant deferring to the family head's wishes. Therefore, the family head's decisions usually passed. Opposition merely expressed some concerns, no need to worry about it too much. They went up to the second floor. A long corridor stretched ahead. The 2 entered the innermost room. First to catch the eye was a massive triangular incense burner, behind which sat several elders like shadows. The incense smoke hung like a curtain between the elders and them. Though the atmosphere was solemn and elegant, their conversation was quite casual. Hellas cleared his throat, and the elders' idle chatter finally ceased. This child is Luca. Hellas introduced Luca, though he still seemed unaccustomed to the new name. The elders murmured among themselves, commenting on Luca's appearance, their voices growing louder. He and Hellas simply stood quietly waiting. One elder beckoned him to come closer. He walked toward the incense burner in the center of the room. The elder who had called him gestured with his hand. He didn't stop until he reached the elder's presence. The elder extended his hand, caressing Luca's cheek. Child, you must survive. To do so, you must devour chaos rather than be devoured by it. Even if your throat is torn apart, you must achieve this. The elder seemed to be speaking about Luca's situation, even mentioning things he didn't yet fully understand. Luca considered how to respond. I will. He instinctively felt that the elder caressing his cheek was the one who supported his adoption. Luca passed by the incense burner and returned to Hellas's side. Please quiet down, everyone. Now let's move to the next agenda item. He then signaled for Luca to leave first. Luca turned to depart. Hellas grasped his shoulder, stopping him. This puzzled Luca. He knows I might be in collusion with Kinu, so why would he let me eavesdrop on such an important conversation? The elders whispered among themselves. Since the family head has decided this way, let's continue. Luca listened to an hour-long meeting between the elders and family head. Upon exiting the music hall's main entrance, Luca asked Hellas, why didn't you let me leave but instead had me attend the meeting? Luca suspected that neither Nicholas nor Joel had ever participated in elder meetings. You must find the answer yourself, Hellas said without looking back. This seemed to be Hellas's educational method. The children needed to learn some hard lessons. The scene shifts to the morning of Luca's final day at the main house. The past 3 days had been different from his expectations. At least I can finally say goodbye to this place. When Luca stepped out of his room, a little guy a head shorter than him was pointing at him with a pistol. Dad said children like you can dodge bullets. Is that true? I knew his face and name clearly. Emilio Castoria, son of eldest son Nicholas. Emilio, you know I'm your uncle, right? I know, but you're a low-born person from the lower classes. Calling him a little brat would be kind. Better to call him an ungrateful pest. The sound of gun parts engaging echoed. Only a bang was heard. Luca stood motionless. Though the distance was close, Luca anticipated he would miss. Emilio jumped up and down in place, furious. "Why didn't you dodge? You were supposed to move and avoid it." Luca snatched the pistol away, then kicked him flying into the trees with one foot. Emilio sat paralyzed on the ground, staring blankly at Luca. Luca stood above, pointing the gun at Emilio. "Go tell your father that Uncle wanted to kill you." Servants came running from all directions upon hearing the gunshot. Nicholas also ran over and embraced Emilio. Emilio cried with snot and tears streaming in Nicholas's arms. Nicholas stared coldly at Luca. "What happened here, Luca?" He pointed a gun at an adult. "So I gave him a small lesson, to prevent him from doing such things again." Nicholas covered his face and sighed. "I suppose so." But Luca interrupted him directly. "I'm also somewhat angry. If it had been someone else, they might already be dead. This little brat already doesn't value others' lives." Nicholas handed Emilio to the nanny. "Can we talk privately?" He then walked into Luca's room. I followed Nicholas inside and closed the door. Nicholas sat in a nearby chair with a smile. Well, Luca. The people outside will think we're having a serious conflict. You're afraid others will think we're secretly allied, so you used your own son to create this opportunity for us to meet alone. I even doubt Emilio isn't your biological child." Nicholas revealed a terrifying smile. "As I expected, you're excellent. 3 times smarter than Joel. Though he is my biological son, if something happened, I could just have another one." Luca walked toward the door, preparing to throw Nicholas out. "I know you've already allied with Giselle. However, she doesn't fully understand the complete truth. At this rate, the next family head will be Joel. In that case, I might not keep my life." Luca developed some interest in Nicholas. "I'll give you a few minutes. With your insight, you should already roughly understand what kind of people Joel and I are. It may not seem that way now, but once the selection begins, you'll see people suddenly appearing to support Joel. If Joel becomes family head, I might die. If I possessed overwhelming power like my father, this wouldn't be an issue. Unfortunately, neither Joel nor I have such capability." Luca confirmed this. "But Joel lacks the ability to stop you. Why do you think he'll win? Some people strongly hope the heir has a military background. While some prefer fools they can control, I'm not like them. Those who oppose our father prefer the next generation to have a weaker manager." Hearing this, Luca understood those people's intentions. They wanted to support a puppet to manipulate his decisions. "Does that mean the hell as I know isn't his true performance as captain? So what do you want me to do?" Nicholas smiled. "It's simple. Pretend to oppose me, raise your reputation within the family, attract connections. Those relatives who want the family head to have military background will more easily lean toward you. If you can steal Joel's support base and split off a portion, then I, with my stable position, can become family head." From the moment Luca met him, in just 2 days, Nicholas had formulated and implemented his victory plan, even willing to put his own son in danger. As Giselle said, Nicholas truly resembled Headless. "What if my strength becomes powerful enough to inherit the family head position?" Nicholas stopped in his tracks. "If you truly had such thoughts, you wouldn't ask this question. Even if you became family head, you wouldn't kill me. When managing the family, Luca would need advisors like me, wouldn't you? You have the ability to control me." Luca grinned. "I'm not being sarcastic, I genuinely feel this way. During my days rummaging through garbage, I thought nobles all lived carefree lives." Nicholas didn't deny it. "Everyone has their own troubles. If you need anything, I'll help you as much as I can. After all, I'm a fairly high-ranking government official. Don't worry about Giselle. Even if you support her, she'll have difficulty becoming family head. Giselle isn't our competitor, so there's no reason to eliminate her." As soon as he left, he shouted outside, "Luca, no matter how excellent you are, you can't expect recognition from the Castoria family while disrespecting your elders." His acting was truly outstanding. I nearly couldn't help applauding him. The 3 days at the main house ended here, but Luca felt like he'd stayed a week. From now on, Luca would frequently visit the Castoria mansion, though most times it would be together with Headless. Nominally, his home was the Castoria mansion, but Luca had already begun missing that small room in the training camp dormitory. Headless activated the holographic projection and began handling accumulated work. He hadn't stopped since getting in the vehicle. Luca hadn't expected the Imperial Guard captain's duties to be so busy. During his stay at the Castoria family residence, he had done everything possible to meet Headless's expectations. However, now Luca wasn't certain those things were truly what he wanted. Headless as a father, and also as a patriarch, was completely different from the Imperial Guard captain he knew. Luca carefully reflected on the events of these past days, lest he miss anything important. Just then, Luca felt the propulsion units beneath the aerial vehicle operating. He noticed the vehicle was moving backward, but there was no reason to change direction midway. Headless shut down all holographic projections. "Don't panic, Luca. This is part of the plan. The aerial vehicle we're riding in has likely been hacked. Terrorists will be waiting for us at the intercept location. Reinforcements will arrive in 10 minutes, so we just need to hold out until then." Headless opened the aerial vehicle's storage compartment and tossed a pistol and knife to Luca. They couldn't parachute now because that would make them sitting ducks, so they needed to land first. Landing at the enemy ambush position would be dangerous. Headless calmly approached the control computer. Sure enough, at that location, everything had to be resolved. Just as Luca was thinking this, he used physical means. Headless's arm penetrated the computer screen. Seeing your surprised expression is quite amusing. Let me ask you a question. What do you think of the current situation? Luca grasped the wall and ceiling handles to steady himself. The answer came quickly. Captain, you've made yourself bait. Headless confirmed this. This incident will help Barbara gain trust within Nemesis because she created a situation capable of attacking the Imperial Guard captain. Luca hadn't expected Barbara to be the topic again. Honestly, whether ally or enemy, Luca wanted to punch her in the face. As the flying vehicle crashed violently to the ground, the vehicle emitted thick smoke. The next second, the deformed door was kicked away. Thanks to the impact-absorbing gel, both Luca and Headless were unharmed. Luca jumped out the window to survey the terrain. This barren land didn't have a single hiding place. Could they really hold out for 10 minutes? Headless emerged and patted Luca's shoulder, like a sea breeze. Then his pupil's edges glowed red. His terminal connected with the satellite. Under satellite operation, Sky Eye quickly locked onto Nemesis personnel, even clearly knowing how many opponents there were. Next, Headless drew the pistol hidden at his waist. Wonderful weather today. What luck. Very clear visibility. As he pulled the trigger, the laser gun began continuously gathering energy. Shortly after, a laser trailing its trajectory flew westward. This scene left Luca completely stunned. Headless making himself bait didn't mean he wasn't prepared for ambush. He willingly served as bait because he could handle those guys alone. Headless continued shooting while speaking. You'll also be able to identify enemies in 12 seconds. Explosion sounds and screams faintly reached Luca's ears. If he could determine enemy positions without seeing them, Luca had already guessed the reason. It must be satellite access. I am, after all, the Imperial Guard captain. I can at least allocate one military satellite for personal use. Hearing this, Luca found it incredible. Could one person really do such things? Even exceptional individuals would find it difficult to replicate this kind of sniping. It required military satellites and massive computational assistance. Though it seemed simple, it was actually tactical-level support. Was this the authority possessed by the Empire's chief Imperial Guard captain? Soon a bullet flew toward Luca's position, grazing where his forehead had originally been. The distance was considerable, yet it was precise sniping. They had come to assassinate an Imperial Guard captain. They must have made thorough preparations. Everyone locked their attacks on Headless. Whether the little brat beside him lived or died didn't matter to them. Headless grinned, drew a long spear. I'll handle those in full mechanical armor. You just do your utmost to stay alive. Luca replied with dissatisfaction. Vague instructions and orders are a superior's failing. Headless shrugged, the swinging spear making sharp sounds, the heavy spear tip scraping across the ground. Luca could only understand those terrible orders like a dog would. Only then can you get ahead. Because this world is full of people lacking virtue. Luca didn't know how to refute this. He could only provide backup support for Headless from behind. The enemies charged like a suicide squad, showing no regard for their lives. As rebel fighters, they were quite decent soldiers. Imperial Guard Captain Headless was one of the Empire's strongest military personnel. Even without an armor core, he was monstrously powerful. Most attackers rushed toward him. Headless killed one rebel instantly with just one strike, then eliminated two more in front. He charged toward the enemies again, facing enemies several times his number. Headless felt no fear. Instead, he grew increasingly excited. Luca had wanted to observe how Headless fought, but his four opponents weren't weak either. These people completely disregarded friendly fire situations. Even being shot wouldn't make them stop. Luca activated Aegis to predict several people's trajectories, converting the surrounding environment into a three-dimensional map. Soon, one of the machine gunners was eliminated by him. Luca engaged in close combat with a warrior. The gunner behind them fired at both their positions. His gaze met that of the Aegis combat technique user. The man was also looking at him. Aegis truly had deep connections with terrorists. He could fight me without high-tech equipment, but we were still completely different. Just then, Luca saw an opening he exposed. He instantly appeared before the man, then grabbed his arm with his left hand. As his body emitted a flash of light, the man was severed by Luca's blade. The moment Luca grabbed his arm, he lost the focus needed to use Aegis combat methods. If he were a skilled user, he would have immediately severed their arm upon contact. Luca then glanced to the side. Headless was surrounded by piles of corpses. While he dealt with 4 people, Headless had already resolved most of the attackers. For an operation to assassinate an Imperial Guard captain, it seemed too careless. Headless told Luca it wouldn't be that simple. Rick should be hiding in the distance. If I were injured in the Crasher battle, he would quickly join the fight to attack me. This is an important opportunity for Nemesis, but it's the same for them. Then why don't we set a trap to catch Rick Kaiser instead? Headless shook his head. Catching Rick Kaiser would strike at them, but couldn't destroy Nemesis. No matter what, the most important thing about this operation is elevating Barbara's position. If we set a trap for Rick, the infiltrating Barbara might die. Years of superior efforts would be wasted. In the Superior's eyes, both Rick Kaiser and I are merely replaceable parts. Hearing this, Luca's heart suddenly trembled. Even an Imperial Guard captain was just a replaceable part. Were there any irreplaceable people in the Empire? Luca stopped mid-sentence, but Headless already understood his question. He pointed upward with his index finger. Only one. You know very well who that person is. People like Luca and Headless, dozens could die without consequence. At most, it would be like a few bricks falling from the Empire's walls. But if the Emperor died, the Empire would collapse. So they were. Nothing more than useful Imperial chess pieces. Regarding Luca becoming the Custoria family's adopted son, everyone looked at him with envious eyes, even began flattering him. Luca knew how everyone viewed this matter. However, these weren't what he wanted. His reason for wanting to get close to Headless was so he wouldn't have to be under his surveillance anymore. But now Luca realized all this was futile. He even shouldered an extremely dangerous mission to investigate Kinu's affairs. Presumably, he would soon pay the corresponding price for joining this family. Now I must do everything in my power to continuously improve my abilities and status. His internship period had now been shortened to 1 year. What remained was going to the lower districts. After that, Luca would be able to realize his wish of becoming an official member of the Imperial Guard. Just as Luca was about to return to the restroom, Luca heard nobles discussing matters concerning Eli. He was puzzled about what had happened, so he approached to inquire about the situation. Luca then learned from them that Eli had severely injured his own brother, essentially crippling him. Now the promising heir of the Kartika family was Eli. Luca couldn't laugh like the others. What exactly had he done? Eli had originally shown no interest in family inheritance and advancement. Moreover, it was said the relationship between the brothers wasn't bad. Yet Eli had severely injured his brother and began coveting the family heir position. Luca could roughly guess the reason. Lilian's death had caused tremendous changes in Eli's mindset. It might even have altered his life goals. Luca waited outside Eli's door for him to return. After waiting about half an hour, a familiar figure soon appeared above Luca. Luca, no, I should call you Lucas Custoria now, shouldn't I? However, Luca still preferred others to use his original name. Eli spoke of trivial matters while entering the room. Luca waited for him to come out in the dormitory building's exterior. I heard you injured your brother. Eli's emotions showed no change whatsoever. It was a formal duel. My brother has always been that type of simple person, so he couldn't withstand provocation. Luca was puzzled about how he had angered his brother. Eli slowly lowered his head. I slept with his girlfriend. Maybe because I'm more handsome, she quickly went with me. I really feel sorry for him. Luca frowned at this handsome bastard. You really are a bastard. Then Eli changed the subject. What dangerous deal did you make? Ordinary conditions wouldn't make you a prestigious family's adopted son. Luca didn't reveal his mission. My life has always been like walking a tightrope. Now it's no different. Eli kicked the ground with his military boot. Even tightrope walkers fall sometimes. But Luca felt that tightrope walkers couldn't simply stop walking the tightrope. Eli glanced at Luca. He knew Luca had no other choice. There had been no choice from the beginning, because not doing it meant death. Then Eli called out to Luca. He decided he wouldn't escape reality anymore. Is it because of that woman? Luca didn't directly mention Lilian Ramos's name. Eli closed his eyes, then opened them slightly. If the family has problems, I'll become the family heir to solve them. If I'm dissatisfied with the Empire, I'll climb to a position where I can change it. This sounded somewhat dangerous, but Luca liked Eli's progressive attitude. So Luca believed that with Eli's abilities and talent, as long as he gave his all, he would definitely be able to achieve it. Luca wouldn't stop him, especially since he currently couldn't provide advice to anyone. Anyway, welcome back, Eli. To become the family heir, you'll need to work harder than you do now. You too, aren't you? Becoming the Custoria family's adopted son was already a decent price for Luca. Why don't we work hard together? That's why we're Imperial Guard cadets. Luca confirmed this, because all he could do now was stay on the rope with all his might. Eli proved his words through action. The next day, he actively led a mission to eliminate indigenous creatures on planet Nova. Luca went to the Empire's workshop. He needed a better weapon. Luca swung the knife in his hand at the trial robot. The blacksmith smiled and asked Luca how it was. Luca affirmed the knife's design. Just holding it makes my body feel tense, which is very comfortable. But I think the power could be lowered a bit. He understood well the intention behind Luca's design. Just as the Empire's master smith expected, he didn't make any special requests, but this was sufficient for Luca's use. Luca asked what its name was. Crucis, ancient language meaning disaster and destruction. The gun earlier was Luina, meaning ruin. Both are girls. You should cherish them like lovers. Luca chuckled softly, gripping a weapon in each hand. I never expected my first loves would be a gun and a knife. I don't even know which will become the main wife. The scene shifts. Luca also arrived at the lower district area, just as he was about to contact Gabriel. A man targeted his wallet. He grabbed the vagrant's wrist and twisted hard. The wrist snapped as wires and components scattered everywhere. The vagrant screamed and quickly fled into the dark alley. Luca gradually adapted. Sure enough, this kind of place should have this kind of feeling. But after Luca made several calls without being able to connect, Luca followed the map's record to Gabriel's residence. If he's ignoring my calls and being late, I plan to flatten his nose. However, when Luca pushed open the door, he only saw Gabriel's body. So this is why he's not answering calls? Just then, his arm began trembling slightly. Buddy, I'm not dead yet. Soon, Luca rushed Gabriel to the hospital. Gabriel's chest and abdomen had 4 gunshot wounds. Fortunately, there was no life-threatening danger. This meant they probably weren't trying to kill him. Luca asked what had happened. It turned out this was a warning. The atmosphere here had been tense recently, with various factions beginning to form alliances. But Gabriel wasn't a gang member, he was just a freelancer making a living through violence. However, Luca still suggested he join one, otherwise he wouldn't last long. Yet Gabriel would rather die than work for such trash. More than that, he was puzzled why Luca had come looking for him. Luca didn't say anything. Tomorrow at this time I'll come again. Remember to take the strongest painkillers and wait. Though Gabriel was dissatisfied, he would still follow Luca's instructions. He was a loyal person who wouldn't betray someone he owed. So I had always been investing in Gabriel. Finding traces left by Kinu in the lower districts indeed wasn't that easy. It seemed he had close relationships with the dual arena's former managers. If I could figure out what Kinu had been doing during that period, I might find some clues. Luca didn't understand what he was doing in such a place, in this barren land. There were no dreams to speak of. Luca didn't return to the upper district residence. He planned to stay in the lower districts for a few days. He walked from the prosperous area to the slums, occasionally stopping at boundary areas where he could look up at the upper districts. His steps stopped before a dilapidated building. The 72nd orphanage. This was where Luca had grown up. Luca gazed at the orphanage building from across the street. A truck stopped in front of the orphanage. More embezzlement, this pig of a man. Some awakened children poked their heads out to look outside. The older children undoubtedly knew what the orphanage director was doing, but they had no power to stop the corruption. The world won't change, only I can change myself. But I can intervene in this. Doing so won't change the world. At most, it will let the children here eat a few more full meals. Soon after, everything will quickly return to how it was. When Luca approached the two men, a worker stared at him. They weren't thugs, just ordinary laborers. But even such change was worth taking action for. Luca, you've become weak. The man directly pulled a pistol from his jacket. However, his bullet was caught by Luca's hand. Luca opened his palm. The deformed bullet head dropped at his feet. The other man had already become frightened and didn't dare interfere further. The director recognized him. You're Luca. Then Luca punched the director in the jaw. Still doing this kind of business? You've made enough money, haven't you? The director began playing the emotional card. I treated you well. Later, I even gave you more food than others. Luca looked at the director and smiled. I'm grateful, which is why I'm not twisting your neck right now. The director frantically begged for mercy. I was wrong. Tell me what's made you dissatisfied. I'll apologize. Luca had no sense of mission to care for the orphanage where he'd grown up. Charitable activities were nothing more than the wealthy's momentary whim and hypocrisy. He quietly listened to the orphanage director's nonsense. This type of person wasn't even worth beating or killing. Even if they replaced the orphanage director, the situation wouldn't change much. Luca looked toward the children watching from the windows. Someone's eyes lit up as they waved at him. Luca remembered his days of not having enough to eat and going out to rummage through garbage. Then he punched the director in the face. Watch your future behavior, and make sure the children eat their fill tomorrow. With that, Luca disappeared into the dark alley. The scene shifts to the next day. Gabriel had taken large amounts of painkillers, and came out with Luca. Gabriel complained loudly. If it were normal times, Luca would have already kicked his leg. Is it because I slept well last night? Beating up someone annoying is good for mental health, Luca had to admit. Soon the two arrived at the dual arena entrance. The gang member at the door couldn't quite believe it. Gabriel, I heard you got shot. You're actually still alive. Gabriel chatted with acquaintances. News travels that fast? Don't know which bastard did it. I'm definitely going to slaughter them. Soon he noticed Luca nearby. He had also watched that previous match. Under his subordinate's guidance, he came to Alef's office. Alef still wore his sharp expression, standing up to welcome Luca like greeting a distinguished guest. Do you want to participate in matches? Luca denied his assumption. This time, I have something I want to discuss with you privately. Alef pulled out a cigarette. That won't do. I'm not good at fighting. I need some security guarantees. To me, those two behind are nothing but scarecrows. The two bodyguards became furious, frowning as they tightly gripped their guns. Alef looked coldly at Luca. Whether you're good boy or Luca, don't think being able to fight makes you arrogant. I respect your teacher, but that doesn't mean you can be rude. Looks like we'll need to fight first. Alef extinguished the cigarette in his hand. The two subordinates immediately aimed their guns at Luca. Luca grinned. Gabriel, go block the door! Hearing Gabriel's bewildered response, Luca bent his knees slightly and jumped up, his fingers embedded into the ceiling's concrete. Hanging upside down from the ceiling, Luca looked down at the two bodyguards. Their guns reacted a step too slow. Luca spun around while gripping the ceiling and dropped down, crouching to avoid the line of fire. Seeing this, both men broke into cold sweats when the two fired again. The bullets passed through where Luca's head had originally been, but their bullets hit each other instead. Two screams immediately echoed in the room. Alef frowned. The bodyguards really were meaningless. The scene shifts. It began raining heavily outside on the street. Luca and Gabriel had appeared at Gilda's repair shop. He was treating Gabriel's mechanical arm because it hurt whenever it rained. Meanwhile, Luca reflected on the agreement he'd just reached with Alef. Alef reluctantly scanned Luca's code with his terminal. The information before his eyes startled him. Ultimately, he agreed to Luca's request. Luca hoped he would provide information about former manager Tora. The more detailed, the better. Alef wanted his guarantee to become an attendant. When Luca came of age in a year, he would gain the right to the appoint assistant.